We're ready. Ben Joravsky, is that a brand new Chicago Reader I see there on your table?
It is indeed.
Oh, wow.
Yep. Picked it up on my way over here.
Oh, tell us about it. Could you please?
That one. Fashion for All. It's a story about fashion, and on the front page. And, yeah.
Did you write an article about fashion in this week's Chicago Reader?
No, negatory. You would not want me to write an article about fashion.
Okay, so say the Chicago Reader said, Ben, we need you to do an article about fashion. What would you do? Where would your brain go?
Where would my brain... I would immediately call my wife and ask her for help.
Okay.
Because she's very fashion conscious. Or I would call my daughters and ask them for help. Or I would call you and go, yo, what are the millennials wearing these days? In other words,
go to me.
I'd be seeking out help. But there are people in my life who are really very fashion conscious. So.
Bruce, we see you on the live stream chat, tuning in early. That's awesome. How's it going?
Yo.
Oh, yo, Bruce. So, okay, let's hear the song of the day. This is when Ben Joravsky sings us a nice song of the day to make sure that all of you can hear us on the live stream chat. So, Ben Joravsky, if you could, please, give us that song of the day.
This is a song that's thematically important to what I'm going to lead off with by talking. And it's a song from, I believe, the late 60s, but don't quote me. Liar. Yo. Liar.
What? Liar?
Yeah, it's called Liar. I think Three Dog Night sang it.
Oh, hell yeah.
I know that's one of your favorite groups.
Jeremiah was a bullfrog, right? Was a good friend of mine.
Wait, time out. Did you just look that up on Google?
No, I've known that. I've actually known that.
How did you know that? You're like a millennial.
I know classic rock, man. Come on.
Dude, man. Oh, sometimes, we should have the listeners in on our conversations when I drive. Didn't drive today, by the way. Just want to let you know.
Damn it. We got to ride the train.
The doctor loves when I drive because he gets to drive. Oh, Dennis, I'm tired. You drive. He likes driving, folks.
I'm a country boy, and I don't have a vehicle, so any chance I get to drive, I love it.
So there's one of three things are on playing when we're driving. One, Jimmy Dore. Oh, I love him. Two, Joe Rogan. Love him. No, three old Dave Chappelle comedy bits that both of us have heard 20 times each. But let's listen to it one more.
Don't forget Roy D. Mercer prank phone calls.
Roy D. Mercer.
Guys, if anyone listening hasn't heard of Roy D. Mercer and you like those prank phone calls, check it out. It's Southern, all right?
It's hilarious.
It's super Southern, but it's like super funny. Yeah, this is Roy D. Mercer. How big a boy are you?
No, he's hilarious. Or Dennis loves classic rock, man. So we got it, the classic rock station, and yeah, man. So it's all good as far as I'm concerned.
Okay. Oh, Pat Rott says ears bleeding. So yes, they can hear us, Ben. They heard that song of the day.
Liar. I don't even know how. I just know it goes liar. Oh, sorry.
I know a song by the Rollins Band called Liar. But anyway.
Rollins Band.
Yeah, Henry Rollins. All right.
Henry Rollins.
Your Ben Joravsky show for Thursday, November 14th is moments away. But before we get into that, we need to thank the following unions for jumping on board and sponsoring this program. First up, it's the International Association of Machinists and Aerospace Workers, Local 126 and District 8. The International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, Local 9. The International Union of Operating Engineers, Local 150. And, of course, today's Ben Joravsky show is brought to you by our dear friends at the Chicago Federation of Labor. Song of the day.
Oh, liar.
The Ben Joravsky show starts now. It is Thursday, November 14th, and live from the Chicago Sun-Times Chicago Reader Studio on Racine Avenue, this is the Ben Joravsky Show. Today on the program, it's our weekly visit with Idney's Times writer and chicken sandwich lover, Miles Kampf-Lassin. And we're talking the 2020 election with co-host of WVON's Seaton and Buchanan, David Seaton. And now your host, Chicago Reader columnist, Ben Joravsky.
Hello, everybody. Ben Joravsky here. We're calling this Sleeping with the Fishes Thursday. And here's why. I'll tell you why. I saw Godfather 2 last night on the big screen where it was meant to be seen. I want to thank my dear friend El Dragon for encouraging me to go. He said, Ben, you got to go see it. It's very rarely on the big screen. We don't know.
Frequent Ben Joravsky show guest, Adolfo Mondragon?
Yes, that one.
Wow.
El Dragon.
Did he curse during the movie?
Many times. And, you know, it was kind of weird because there were so few people in the theater. Okay, well, let me just back up. It's one of those oldies for, some of our millennial listeners may not know about it. Okay? Hey, all right? So it came out in 1974. It was part 2 of the trilogy, the Godfather trilogy. And this tells the story about the rise, the fall, and the rise again of Michael Corleone, who's the son to Vito Corleone and the whole Corleone empire. I actually think I don't have to explain anymore. Even I, as I said yesterday, D, who is bred to explain absolutely everything under the guise that somebody might not know it, I think it's safe to assume that most people out there listening know about The Godfather.
Yeah, I think so.
Although trying to explain the casino rates to people in Chicago would be a little more difficult. But anyway.
Another good movie, Casino.
Excellent. Yes.
That's correct.
If they show that, El Dragon and I will be right there. So anyway, every now and then, I think it's like twice a month or so, the theaters bring back oldies, golden oldies, and put them on the screen, the big screen where they were meant to be seen. And so last night it was Godfather 2's turn. It was an excellent movie in so many ways. It's even better than I remembered. I mean, I've seen bits and pieces on TV from time to time, but this is the first time since the 70s, I think, where I sat down and watched it in one stretch from beginning to end. It flowed. I never looked at my watch. I never got restless. There's an intermission. I mean, imagine that. That's how long it is. I think it's like 3.5 hours long, but the time just flew. I was totally into it. And because this gets to the point you raised, because it's an golden oldie, and there were hardly any.
Tough to say, golden oldie.
And there was hardly anyone in the theater. El Dragon and I felt comfortable talking. Oh my God, this scene, I loved it. Well, mostly me. He was good about it. I was like, oh, this is my favorite scene. I love this scene. Or this scene sucks, because there's a couple scenes there. Yeah, Coppola, I don't know. What a couple
But
scenes.
it was just you two in there?
No, there's about 6 other people there.
They hated your guts.
Yeah, probably. But they were scattered around the theater. And when it was done, El Dragon and I clapped. We loved it so much, we actually applauded at the end of the movie. Anyway, the movie's a great movie. It's about so many different things. But ultimately, it's about lying. And that's why I was saying liar. Well, I wouldn't say ultimately it's only about lying. I guess it's more about the abuse of power and lying. The thing is that in this movie, everybody lies. And, we are taught, of course, never to lie. You always got to tell the truth. You raise your right hand. I swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth. So help me God. But in life, people are lying. And in this movie, let's see, gangsters lie to other gangsters. And they do it when they're being sincere. There's no one like you to me. I love you more. Oh. That's when Michael Corleone is talking to Hyman Roth. Remember, I don't know. Do you even know the movie, D?
No. That's one hell of a first name, Hyman.
Yeah, and it's like, there's no one like you. I love you. Oh, baby. I mean, they're lying. They're just deceiving one another behind the scenes. They're plotting against each other, trying to kill each other. Brothers lie to brothers. Fredo, you're my brother. Oh, I love you.
The episode where Ben Joravsky slaps himself in the face.
He's lying. Fredo's working with Roth to kill Michael Corleone. I mean, it's just like everybody's lying. Husbands lie to wives. Wives lie to husbands. Fathers lie to sons. There's one scene where Michael Corleone, he gets his sidekick, the Robert Duvall character, to buy a present for his son, and he goes, hey, what did you buy him so I can act like I know what I bought him? Is he lying to his kid? Oh, I love you like nothing else. Everybody's lying to everybody, but ultimately, here's the point. Politicians lie to their constituents. Oh, there's a big surprise there, D. But in this movie, it's utter hypocrisy. There's a senator from, I think, Nevada, the state of Nevada, who is under the employ of the Corleone family. So he's lying about that, of course. He doesn't want people to know that he's secretly on the take from the Corleones. He's their secret pawn in the state of Nevada. Meanwhile, he's lying to the Corleone family because, he despises them, but he pretends like he loves them. Then there's this congressional hearing, which is why the movie is so appropriate for the time. There's a congressional hearing, Senate hearing into the Corleone Empire. And let's see, there's on the Michael Corleone lies under oath. Another witness lies under oath. Two witnesses lie under oath. And then there's the senator who's on the panel who works for the Corleone family. So he's lying about being impartial. And finally, the lawyer to the senator who's running the hearing is working for a rival gangster. So the whole thing is a hoax. So everybody in the hearing where you're testifying to find the truth is lying. And so I'm watching this movie and seeing all the blatant lies and the sincerity with which people lie. That's just like, how dare you insist it's any other way? And they're lying, but they say it with utter sincerity. And you think, do you believe that you're telling the truth now? Or you're just a great actor? And this fast forward to Donald Trump. In the Trump administration, they lie every day about everything. They'll say something at the beginning of the day and then say something else at the end of the day, and you're supposed to believe them at every single moment. Donald Trump, for instance, he pled guilty, his foundation, to all kinds of deceptive practices, raising money from people who thought it was going to go to help veterans, when in fact he was spending it on political campaign things. He made a portrait for himself. So here was a case of fraud, deceit, lying. He pled guilty to it. They had to pay off some fines. In pleading guilty, he admitted to wrongdoing, and then boom, when he talks about it on Twitter, it's a fake investigation, a hoax. So he's lying about that. Yes, no collusion. Lying. So I'm watching the replay of yesterday's congressional hearing, and I'm listening to these Republicans, congressmen, going on and on and on, and trying to just confuse us and divert our attention from the central investigation. I'm thinking, you know what? If Coppola were to do a movie about this, there would be the scenes where you would see the Republicans conferring with Donald Trump's aides in the White House to get it all together, to get their strategy together, just the way in Godfather 2, the gangsters were conspiring with the senators who were supposedly investigating the gangsters. Lying. The only time you get the truth is when you watch a movie. And of course, that's fiction. We got a great show today, everybody. Miles Kampf-Lassin will be here from In These Times, No Lies from Miles. He tells the truth. All right? and nothing but the truth. And
better.
we'll be talking. Oh my God, we got a lot of Bernie talk with Miles. I just wrote a column about Bernie in the mainstream media. It's on Miles's mind as well. And we'll be talking about the investigation, the impeachment investigation, and all sorts of local politics we'll be throwing at Miles. David Seaton, who is now the co-host of a show on WVON. How about that, huh?
Seaton and Buchanan.
Seaton and Buchanan.
He's Seaton.
Yeah, he's Seaton, and there's Buchanan.
Yeah.
That would be Atiba Buchanan, who's become one of our most popular guests on our show. God bless.
I introduced
Atiba
you guys.
Buchanan.
I'm glad you like him.
Like doesn't quite convey the feeling I have for Atiba
Nice,
Buchanan.
nice.
He is a great guest, and I love Atiba Buchanan and David Seaton as well. David's a little more on the conservative side, so I'm looking forward to our discussions. We'll be talking about the impeachment hearings, also about some Bernie Sanders ideas. We're going to be talking about Bernie's response. Well, we'll tease. It's called a tease, D.
Nice.
Tease.
That's good.
Anyway, so I'm
So
looking
good at
forward to
this.
political talk with David Seaton and Mel's Kampf-Lassin. Politics. But before we do any of that, I'm going to kick things over to the young man from Alton, the man they call the doctor, with the news.
How's it going, everybody? You're right, though. People do lie all the time, man.
Mm-hmm.
Excellent singing at the beginning of the show. That was really good.
Oh, I get it. It's a lie. Well, that was subtle. All right?
All right.
Subtle.
Let's find out what's happening in Chicago and or Illinois this afternoon. Turns out, quite a bit. First up, well, it's our Chicago mayor.
This little light of mine, I'm going to let it shine.
Mayor, what?
By the way, I just want to say, usually before the show, we go over what the news
Oh,
items
my
are.
God.
We didn't do that. I have no idea what you're going to
Oh,
throw.
well.
This is called improv, ladies and gentlemen.
All right,
We're called winging it.
We're being honest today, huh?
Well, I wouldn't want to lie.
Oh, I see. I see. Subtle.
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 All right. Chicago Mayor Lori Lightfoot, her Thursday schedule includes a visit to Salmon P. Chase Elementary School to launch the academic program application process to expand access to academic programs. And her schedule also includes quite a bit of walking back.
You mean she's going to walk back from Chase School to City Hall?
Yeah, sure.
That's something I would do. It's a nice day. It's 30 degrees. Let's go for a walk. Do I gotta?
good
And we
God.
walk all the way from Chase Elementary.
Sir walks a lot over here. So a deal is yet to be cut
Oh,
between
yeah.
Chicago Mayor Lightfoot and the state capitol. She's looking to get some help on the budget deficit. The following comes from the Chicago Sun-Times and the one and only Fran the Womance Spielman. With the clock running out on the fall veto session, Mayor Lori Lightfoot on Thursday likened attempts to pass her ambitious legislative agenda to, quote, and maybe, what's the name of Lori Lightfoot's favorite musician? Lundgren?
Oh, Todd Rundgren.
Todd Rundgren, that's it. Maybe this is a lyric from Todd Rundgren. I don't know, but she likened the attempts to pass her ambitious legislative agenda to, quote, going through the eye of a needle.
No, that is, I think that's a biblical reference. I don't believe Todd Rundgren has ever used that line, but
Big Rundgren fan, huh?
I know a few lines. You want me to sing a Rundgren song?
Yeah, sure. It's better in sports.
Think of me. Da, 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 da.
Oh, here we go. Yeah, those are the lyrics. Huh? Da-da-da-da, that part there.
I know Lori Lightfoot loves Todd Rundgren. For
I
10
know.
trivia points. Here we go. Let's see how good your memory is, Mr. Youngster. Her favorite song, remember the debate? It was ancient history. I forget who the commentator was. What's your favorite song during the debate? And Lori Lightfoot said some song by Todd Rundgren. The name of the song I can't remember. Tony Preckwinkle, what song?
Oh, a change is going to come, I think.
How did you...
I listen to the shows after the show. It's my job to listen to the shows and post the shows. That's
Ladies
how-
and gentlemen, I have a confession to make since we're not lying. When I asked Dee that question, I did not know the answer because I couldn't remember it. And then it would have been one of those things if he didn't know, he'd said, I do not know. And I would have to go, I don't know either. I just think it was an oldie. But now I remember it was a song. She goes, like, really dance to it. It's not like a dance song anyway. let's redo the high points of the mayoral election of April.
So, going through the eye of a needle is what
yes.
she like in the attempts to pass her ambitious legislative agenda too. Lightfoot tried to tamp down expectations for her two major priorities: a revised tax structure for a Chicago casino and a graduated real estate transfer tax. We have some quotes from Lightfoot here. We continue to work hard, particularly in the House, because the casino bill has to originate in the House. We've been working hard, really literally all night, to make sure we can get something to the floor of the House today, then move it over to the Senate. But you know this as well as I do. In a veto session, it's a narrow window of time, and realistically, we've had a day and a half of work this week. It's like going through the eye of a needle, and we're trying to thread that as best we can.
Wait, she just said that in an impromptu statement?
Yeah.
That's pretty good. I have the needle, and we have to thread that. I mean, you got to give her credit for that. That's pretty, poetic.
Call her up if you need help with your next article or something, your next column. Maybe she can help you out. Maybe she's better than Rom at the whole column thing.
Rom in the basement. Honey, what's a synonym for turkey? I'm writing this article.
I don't know. What is a synonym for turkey?
That's an old bit from an ancient radio show we used to have where I was analyzing an article that allegedly was written by one Rahm Emanuel. And you know what, Dee? I must confess one more time, I do not believe he wrote the article. Furthermore, I'm not convinced he actually read the article. So, and then I had this vision of Rahm writing his articles, hard at work in his jockey shorts with a pen and a notebook like this, going, honey, I need a synonym. Writing is hard, folks. If it was easy, everybody would do it.
So it's looking like no deal for the mayor as of right now. We hope she at least got to enjoy her time in Springfield, don't we, Ben?
Was she there for a full day? I'm not sure. Did she spend the night or did she just go in and then leave? I can't remember.
I think she just went for the day and then came back.
She came back, yeah. As we recall, we were debating this point yesterday. Do you remember this?
No.
Your memory is interesting. You have a better long-term memory than short-term memory, a sign of heavy reefer smoking. So yesterday we were discussing and debating whether the Sun-Times and the Tribune were more accurate in their depiction of what went down in Springfield than Politico.
Oh,
remember that debate, huh?
Uh-huh.
Wake up, smell the coffee.
What? That's me smoking pot.
Yeah.
Realizing it.
And also, that's also, well, we're not going to say who that's an imitation of, but it's a good imitation of someone. But anyway, and I was like, I don't know, I think I'm going to go with the Tribune Sun-Times rendition of events that she didn't get what she wanted. And, let me just say this. The original casino legislation, I know I interrupted you, so I have no idea where you're going with this, but let me just point this out. It is difficult to get legislation through Springfield sometimes, particularly when you're revising it. You already cut a deal. But the casino legislation that ultimately passed, I think it passed in like 24 hours or 48 hours over the weekend. I remember hearing sports talk show host D talk about it. Yeah, even sports talk hosts.
Don't go talking about sports.
My beloved Bulls play the Bucks tonight. Anyway, they were talking about it because it had to do with gambling, sports betting, and that was a big issue for them. Apparently, that's what they're hoping to get money, advertising money revenue from that. Anyway, and so they were trying to make sense of it. I remember one sports talk show host saying, I don't know what's going on. It's absolutely impossible to follow this stuff. And then the next day, they cut a deal. So I'm sure most of the legislators...
Oh, hello.
hadn't read the legislation, had no idea what was in it, and now here we are all this time later trying to figure out how to make it actually work. So I can understand why she's frustrated, Lori Lightfoot, by not being able to pass something overnight, but the first legislation was passed essentially overnight.
Oh, damn, the live stream paused. It's frozen.
Oh,
Guys, we're going to just give you the intro here, or the little Ben Joravsky show video. All right. The Brian the Techie is aware of the problem, and maybe we can get that fixed.
The smartest man in this entire building.
Oh, my God, he's so smart.
I know. His brain is huge.
All right, moving on here. No deal in Springfield for the Lightfoot.
On casinos.
There. On casinos. So that was walk back number one. On to the next one. We have an update on yesterday's out of nowhere statement from the mayor. It involved her ongoing dispute with Ben's favorite rideshare company, Uber. You love Uber, right? Tell us your thoughts on Uber, please.
Well, first of all,
when was the last time you Ubered?
I've never Ubered or Lyft because I don't have the app, but I've been with people who have done it.
Like me.
Yes, but I believe it was Lyft.
Yeah,
Is there
yeah.
a difference between Lyft and Uber just in terms of the service? Or?
Not really. It's the same thing.
Same thing. So I've never actually had the pleasure of going doot, 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 doot on my phone because they don't have that. I'm an old. If I'm going to I'm a cab guy. All right. Brian has entered the building.
That's correct.
Thank you, Robert Mueller. Anyway, if I'm going to get from A to B and it's not public transportation, a bike or a car, I'll take Lyft. And it's generally somebody else doing the app work for me. So really have no opinion of Uber other than my general sense of disgust and disdain for any of these high-tech industries that people swear allegiance and love to, and without viewing the consequences to everybody else in the universe from the pleasure they draw from it, if that makes any sense.
Hey, guys, the live stream's back up. We're going now.
Brian fixed it.
Brian, live stream audience, Brian, yeah.
It's taking everything I can to restrain from asking Brian for his opinions about Godfather 2, because in addition to being the smartest guy in this building, he's a total movie geek, and I'm sure he has a lot of opinions about Godfather 2. But let's move on and not discuss Godfather 2.
All right, yeah,
Great movie.
Like I said here, Ben's favorite rideshare company, Uber. Lightfoot's talking with Uber. The mayor plans to regulate rideshare services by raising taxes on single rideshare rides in congested areas during peak weekday times. The mayor said it would reduce congestion downtown and raise revenues for the city's budget. Uber had an alternative proposal. Lightfoot quickly shot it down. Then came this.
They offered up black ministers $54 million, a one-time deal, if they would convince the mayor to do away with any other kind of regulation. And as we walked these ministers through the realities of what's actually at stake here, I think they realized that, frankly, they'd been hoodwinked.
When pressed.
Oh, got a little bit of the news there.
When pressed.
We don't want to hear that part.
No, I love it when the report. When pressed about blah, blah, blah.
No, so she said that Uber offered black ministers a $54 million payoff to kill her $40 million congestion fee. This happened during yesterday's show. Ben, recall here your thoughts.
First of all, for 10 trivia points,
Oh,
who are we
gosh.
discussing it with?
Yesterday's show.
Yeah.
There was, Monroe Anderson and Mike Novak.
I tell you what, the short-term memory needs some work, okay? Needs, like sit-ups or push-ups you can do for short-term memory.
I don't know.
I love that discussion with Monroe Anderson. He's been around Chicago politics for a long time, both as a writer, an observer, and on the inside as a press aide to Eugene Sawyer. And we heard this, yes, that story broke yesterday that Lori Lightfoot had accused Uber of offering $54 million to black ministers to get them to join their campaign. And Monroe did not believe it. He goes, first of all, it wouldn't take $54 million. I think we came down to $5.40 is all it would take. But I didn't believe that story when it broke yesterday. I had a lot of hard time I just did not believe that story, D. I'm not saying it was a lie. I'm just saying maybe she misheard, right? Maybe she got things confused. It's hard to get everything straight, right? You ever write a column? All right, you got to get it all straight. Now, maybe Lord Lightfoot could appreciate the job of a columnist, okay? You know, it's hard. Someone tells you something, and you think it's golden, but they got it wrong, and then you don't even quite got right what they told you, if that makes any sense. And so by the time you tell the story, it's so distorted from reality. You ever play that telephone game, D?
Oh, yeah.
You know, so that could be, and that if people get upset with, when I like anything, like you ask someone a direct question, spell your name. What? How do you think my name is spelled? My name is John. How do you? Well, it could be Jon, John. If you're a reporter, you got to be precise. People, why are you asking me all these questions? We want to be precise. We want to be accurate. So Lori Lightfoot, she was trained as a lawyer, D, not as a journalist.
I've had a number of ministers who have met with us and said, Uber promised us $54 million, if you back off. And I'm happy to provide names.
Okay, that's what she said yesterday, correct?
That was yesterday. That's
And she's
more.
going to provide names. All right, go more.
They keep throwing up all kinds of things against the wall, claiming that somehow this mayor is going to be against black and brown communities.
And there's more.
And there's more, because here's our walk back.
Number 2.
The following comes from, once again, the Chicago Sun-Times, and once again, the hardest working reporter in this whole damn city, Fran the Woman Spielman. Substituting the word payoff for investments, Mayor Lori Lightfoot on Thursday, today, pulled back from the political bombshell she dropped this week about a publicly traded company that Uber offered black ministers a $54 million payoff to kill her $40 million congestion fee. Now the mayor is using the term, quote, investments to describe Uber's offer to African-American ministers. Here's the quote from the mayor. Guys, I tried finding the audio. Really did. Couldn't. So you're stuck with me just reading the quotes. Here we go. Lightfoot, quote, my understanding, as I said yesterday, was that they offered up $54 million in, I'll put in air quotes, investments. What they're trying to do is divide and conquer and pit one group against another. We've seen that happen historically in Chicago. We're not going to tolerate that. My values and the minister's values are aligned, which is bringing equity and fairness to communities that have been left behind. What we need to do is focus on what Uber and Lyft are trying to do and why it's important to regulate them because of the congestion that's caused. Go ahead there.
All right, listen. First of all, this is, I believe, the second time Lori Lightfoot has thrown out an accusation that she had a sort of back off from, if I recall, talk about, this is doing this, just sitting right here, I don't have it in front of me. It had to do with the police. Do you remember this one day? A lot of this show is about your memory. That's an interesting theme.
I know.
Miles is coming to the studio. We're learning that. But she was about the police, and she heard from somebody. Oh, I remember I was doing a gag about heard it from a friend who that she heard it from somebody that the police laid off a weekend. They like had the blue flu or something. Remember that one?
Okay, yeah.
And then she had to back off of that one, and then the police got mad at her. But my lefty friends, and I love all dearly, got mad at me for like defending the police for being mad at her. Remember that one day? And I mean, come on. You can't just make stuff up as you go along. You have to have you heard it from a friend that's not good enough, okay? And so I remember that one with the police, and then the guy got up at the police. Remember at the city council meeting, the member of the Fraternal Order of Police got up and was chastising her, and she called him a clown, and then she said she didn't apologize for calling him a clown. She apologized for saying it in the microphone. So I, of course, said she should apologize for calling him a clown. But my lefty friends then got mad at me, okay? I'm always getting in trouble with my lefty friends, man. So anyway, yeah, Lori Lightfoot, you got to work on that. You know, you're not just some corporate lawyer anymore, hanging around the corporate lawyer water cooler in the corporate lawyer office. You're the mayor of the city of Chicago, all right? People are really paying attention to what you say.
Heard it from a friend, you were messing around.
It's one of Miles' favorite songs, man.
I know, he's digging it. In shooting down what Uber called the mayor's, quote, categorically false charge, Uber's director of public policy, one Josh Gold, accused the mayor of, quote, confusing the $54 million in revenue that one of our proposals would have raised for her own budget.
Yeah, I could actually see that. I'm trying to decipher and figure out how Lori Lightfoot got $54 million in her mind. And so some black minister probably told her, well, Uber told us this thing is good for $54 million, and somehow in her mind it got turned into Uber was going to pay black ministers $54 million, which, as Monroe Anderson said, is a preposterous claim. And listen, man, playing along with the theme of today's show about lying and all the lying I saw in Godfather 2 last night, I read the article in today's Bright One by Fran Spielman and David Roeder, the great David Roeder, here at the Sun-Times.
Maybe the second hardest working man in the building, all right?
Yes.
David Roeder? Wow.
David Roeder's a very hardworking journalist.
5 computers at his desk at one time.
Don't bother me! But anyway, I could not make heads or tails out of this story. And I may at break force Miles to read it and give him a quiz. Miles shaking his head, I don't want any part of that. It's just two forces throwing numbers out at people. You don't even know if the numbers add up, and it has to do with Uber's contention that their proposed tax rate would raise more money for the city than Mayor Lori Lightfoot's proposed tax rate. Somehow I don't believe that's possible. And Uber also claims that not only would their proposed tax rate raise more money, but that people in poor neighborhoods would pay less of it. So it's a progressive tax. Like Uber, D, I know Uber is thinking about poor people. Like, that's the number one thing in their mind. So I can't make heads or tails out of the numbers, but I can tell you right now that I believe Uber cares about poor people about as much as I believe that senator and Godfather 2 was really seeking the truth when he interrogated Michael Corleone.
Man, I'm really glad you saw that movie last night.
Loved the movie.
So there you are. That's what's going on locally, Chicago and or Illinois. We will keep you posted on those stories as today's program rolls along. People, don't go anywhere, because coming up after this short little break, our good friend Miles Kampf-Lassin is back. Did you bring chicken sandwiches?
Not today.
Damn. Damn.
Not today. I mean, when did we ever get a chicken sandwich?
One of these days.
One of these days.
One of these days. Miles Kampf-Lassin will be joining us here. Don't go anywhere. It's the Ben Joravsky Show, live from the Chicago Sun-Times. The Ben Joravsky Show is supported by Northwestern University's part-time master's program in literature and liberal studies. Students learn from dynamic and diverse faculty as they build advanced skills for critical analysis, writing, and research. Evening classes are held on Northwestern's Evanston and Chicago campuses. The spring quarter application deadline is January 15th. Learn more at sps.northwestern.edu/masters.
Hey, everybody, what you're about to hear are the piano stylings of Jeff Manuel. Man, listen to Jeff go. Jeff Manuel has been playing piano around Chicago for years. He's played for conventions, for celebrities, played in basement bars with blues bands. He's played at prestigious social clubs, fine restaurants, and in the intimacy of private homes. Book Jeff Manuel at jeffmanuelpianist.com. Don't worry, I'll spell his name at the end of this commercial. You know what Chicago Magazine said? They said that Jeff Manuel is, quote, as comfortable with Chopin as he is with Cole Porter. He's excellent and his performance is joyous. He offers an elegant stream of compositions and interpretations that entertains the mind but won't hurt the ears. To hear more of Jeff Manuel's work and to book Jeff for your next event, go to jeffmanuelpianist.com. I'm going to spell it out for you, people. J-E-F-F. M as in Mary, A, N as in Nancy, UELPIANIST.com. Take it away, Jeff Manuel.
Commercial break over. Welcome back to the Ben Joravsky Show, live from the Chicago Sun-Times.
Ooh, I like that song. Where'd you get that?
I was in the library.
It's sort of 70s Doobie Brothers sound. Hey, Doobie Brothers, what a fool believes.
You could have had a radio career, man.
Not really. You know, well, something else Dennis does, I can just extol your virtues. He's really good when we're driving in the car doing this, what do you call it in radio? Countdown thing?
Post? Hitting the post.
Hitting the post. Miles, you know what this is?
It sounds like a basketball term to me.
Yes.
Yeah.
It does, or a football pass play. But this is a term that for radio, and DJs do this classic rock, where you talk, you have like maybe 5 seconds of a song before the singing starts. So the DJ...
You want me to hit the post real quick?
Yeah, come on. Wait, this guy.
I'll hit the post. Here we go.
This.
So this song's kind of, what, it's like 15, 20 seconds. All right, so here we go. All right, here we go. Hey there, DJ Dennis here, live from the Chicago Sun-Times. You're listening to the Ben Joravsky Show. Coming up, weather, sports, and so much more. People, do not go anywhere. Right now, back to Ben Joravsky.
That's how he does.
Beautiful.
He does
That's
that in the
hitting the
car.
post.
It's called, and he'll do it like first Garth Brooks. And he always does Garth Brooks, which cracks me up.
I saw Garth Brooks last night perform on the Country Music
He won
Awards.
Entertainer of the Year.
He won Entertainer of the Year. And he
Correct.
performed with Blake
Hell yeah.
Shelton. I'm kind of a Garth Brooks fan, I gotta say.
Wow.
Garth Brooks is the man.
But every week you come in with like exploding my mind. It was Dylan last week. Now it's Garth Brooks.
Yeah.
I did not even know. That's why I was watching Godfather. Have you ever seen Godfather 2?
Oh yeah, one of my faves.
It is a great movie, and the reason why I keep
Cuban Revolution is happening in the in real time in the movie. When he does the Fredo kiss.
for 10 trivia points, where were the Cuban scenes actually filmed?
Probably in Miami, I'm guessing. Little Havana.
Young Dennis, your guess?
Florida, Everglades.
Well,
The Dominican Republic.
oh, DR. Probably had better relations at that time.
Yes, the movie was filmed in 1974, so there were no relations between the United States and Cuba back then. But the scenes in Cuba are so incredible. I didn't even talk about that. I'm talking about the obsessive lying that takes place in Godfather 2.
Yeah, very apt for what's going on right now on our
Absolutely.
screens.
Absolutely. We get into that. The unbelievable amount of lying and people doing it with just the utter sincerity. Like in Godfather 2, with the part that just cracks me up when I think about it is when the gangsters talk to each other, and I love you like no one else. And meanwhile, they're plotting to kill each other.
Well, it's very similar to, I've talked about this before, but this is, when Donald Trump says that it was a perfect call, his Zelensky thing, it's all this mobster mentality of, oh, I didn't give away the thing, that's because he's speaking in code. Meanwhile, it turns out he said it so loud into a cell phone in a restaurant that it was overheard by at least two of these embassy staffers.
And that just makes me say this, one of my favorite topics. And I know I'm gonna start off by saying I shouldn't read it, but did you read the Chicago Tribune's editorial today?
I missed that one.
It's just like you said, it's so obvious that Trump and his people are lying about this perfect tape. And their attitude is, well, on one hand he says this, and the other hand they say that. It baffles us. We're just going to turn the page. Meanwhile, they're so righteous about Michael Madigan. Like Michael Madigan, the most dirtiest demon I've ever seen.
Well, Trump has been really, as you might expect, he does not allow any dissent. It's all about pledges of loyalty. So, he has not given any room for any of his, not just spokespeople, but any Republican or any supporter of his to let anything go. He said, stop focusing on the process. So much Democrats focus on the substance and defend me at all costs, against everything. And so they're all in a box. They're trying to, you saw the Nunes's testimony was all just calling Democrats, these crazy, they're out to get it. It's all witch hunt stuff. They're not actually talking about any of the claims because they can't. There's no defense for it. So that's, Trump has to have an iron fist. It's a kind of Corleone-like thing. And you remember, too, in the beginning, the first Godfather, the first line in the first film is, I believe in America, because he's telling the whole story. He's appealing to Vito for, to help, take care of his daughter's evil husband or boyfriend or something like that. But it's all, this is cloaked in this story of, this is American exceptionalism. But you're right, it's all kind of premised on falsehoods.
Yeah, and while I'm at it, there's that when Michael Corleone is testifying in Congress in Godfather 2, he invokes his service as in World War II, I think it was the Navy or the Marines, and he goes, I served this country, as though that has anything to do with the crimes that he's been charged with, like killing people, etc., and so forth. Now, when you hear Republicans playing this role where they're just trying to distract America from the issue at hand, which is whether or not Donald Trump extorted the Ukrainian president. So when you hear Republicans playing that game, do you think that they have a political alternative? In other words, do you think it's impossible for a Republican to play the role of a concerned and objective investigator of these alleged crimes. Do you think it's possible, like Lowell Weicker, way back when in Watergate, when he's a Republican senator from Connecticut who asked tough questions of Nixon's White House aides. He was clearly pursuing the truth. He was not a partisan in that particular investigation. There is nobody even remotely resembling Lowell Weicker in the Republican Party now. And a question I have for you is, do you think it would be politically feasible for a Republican to play that role and still win re-election?
Well, they might be able to win re-election, but they would be, they don't want to take that risk because they'd be throwing the gears into what has been an incredibly successful administration in terms of getting Republican agenda through. I mean, the tax cut that they got, I think they're still, dancing in their riches, and their corporate backers are very, very happy about that. But more importantly, I think has been pushing through all these justices and judges at the federal level. These are lifetime appointments. We saw one just go through yesterday. So these are the type of things that is Mitch McConnell's fantasy, is getting all these people that are going to, push the courts to radically to the right for at least one generation, perhaps more. And this is, there's nothing there's a lot a Democrat can do when they come into office if they happen to beat Donald Trump in terms of executive actions and repealing, but you can't change the makeup of the courts, and this is what they have been dreaming of forever. So as long as that's happening under Donald Trump, I don't think they have much incentive to betray him, and that's exactly what he would consider it, and get his base to primary them. I mean, I think there is a political consequence in the fact that 90% of Republicans still love Trump, and 20 to 30% of America really loves Trump. So, they'll come out hard against anybody if they're, whether it's Chuck Grassley or anybody, if they're speaking against the president.
No, I see the point you're making. You're drawing a distinction between Trump's most loyal base, who love the game that he's playing, who despise Democrats, despise lefties, despise liberals so much that any politician like Trump who just gives them the middle finger the way he does, they'll cheer. And Republicans like the people who write these editorials for the Chicago Tribune, who may not share that hatred of lefties or liberals so much, but really love the right word movement of this country with the judicial appointees and the tax breaks. And so they're willing to look the other way at all the lawlessness, the lying, the deceit.
Well, if they weren't, after that Access Hollywood tape came out in the middle of the campaign, and he did not lose, nobody really left his campaign or denounced him. If they're willing to, have this deeply flawed, not just morally, but clearly deeply corrupt person lead their party and be the one that they take orders from, I can't imagine that, any of the stuff that has come out so far is going to cause them to break ranks at this point.
Yeah. Well,
and shows I think that shows what they actually care about, which is this craven, anti-worker, far-right conservative agenda that they're all, pray fealty to. Whereas, there's a whole, as we can talk about in the 2020 election, there's a whole field of Democrats that are working to undo that agenda that's been pushed down, Americans' throats for the past 2.5 years.
So before we get shift gears away from the investigation, do you ultimately feel that the Democratic drive for impeachment will have an impact on what happens in the next election, or do you think it's just a matter of two separate camps? One side is not going to listen to the other, and when this proceeding is done, it's forgotten.
I don't think it'll be forgotten. I mean, one unfortunate thing is, Trump they announced he raised $3 million since yesterday, since the first hearings went on air. So I do think there's going to be some, it's going to help to drive up his support because he's out here, doing these rallies, claiming it's a witch hunt and everything. But I think the bigger impact is that Americans don't like Donald Trump. He's incredibly unpopular. He's historically unpopular. And most Americans, as these polls show, want there to be an impeachment inquiry, and some polls even show they want him removed from office. So I think that in terms of building a coalition in order to take the president down, going through with the impeachment proceedings is, what you should do. Also, just in the sense of we consider ourselves a democracy and are based on the rule of law. So when, representatives, legislators that have been elected to office betray the public trust and conduct themselves in the way that President Trump has, bribing people and, saying all kinds of horrible things. There has to be some accountability.
I agree. And by the way, I said this yesterday. I'll say this every day. Let Blagojevich out of jail right now. Republicans who were so self-righteous about Rod Blagojevich and his crimes back in the day when they were driving those impeachment hearings are the same Republicans who are ignoring the lying, the deceit, the crimes of Donald Trump and his administration. So if you're not going to be...
And they were allied with like Denny Hassert and these people that are like, career criminals. So I don't think that the Republicans have much high ground in which to claim leadership.
I'm telling you, man, Godfather 2 got it right in 1974. All right, enough Godfather 2. I'll probably be talking about it all day, Miles. It's really on my mind. But something else that's on my mind, it's amazing how our minds seem to be in sync, is the media's attitude to one Senator Bernie Sanders. I just wrote a column about this. It's in the Reader. It came out this week, and I've been... telling El Dragon, who I went to the movie last night, Dennis, all my friends who are really hardcore Bernie supporters, that I have come to the conclusion that you are right, that it's so obvious. And then the lefties look at me, Ben, what took you so long? Well, I thought about it. You're right.
I remember back when you were drinking the Kamala Kool-Aid.
Hold on.
Oh, Lord.
Kamala.
It's almost empty. There's just a little bit left.
The Kamala Kool-Aid. Man, I've been sipping a lot of different Kool-Aids in this presidential race. It's really... but the bias against Bernie is real. Yeah. I see it in coverage of the polls. And I'm talking about the mainstream media. I'm talking about like the New York Times... and you have a story here, MSNBC's Bernie blackout. You did not write it. It's in these Times wrote it. So why don't you summarize what in these Times was getting at in this story, and then I'll tell you about my thoughts on this. Go ahead.
So it's very easy to anecdotally look at any news clip and say that the media is slanted against your candidate. There's so much personality driving so much media coverage, and that's understandable. So that's why what we decided to do with this story, and it's written by Branko Marstich, who's a writer, investigative fellow for us at In These Times. We decided to look more at the numbers, and try to actually judge based on the coverage over a 2-month period. We looked at August and September, and saw what their primetime news coverage was like, who they were covering, and what that type of coverage was like. And so there's statistics there was 240 different episodes that we looked at, and 64% of them discussed Biden, 43% discussed Warren, and only 36 discussed Sanders. So that's about a quarter of what was.
Run that down again. What did you say?
So 64% of them discussed Biden of the episodes. 43% discussed Warren, and 36 discussed Sanders. And the skew towards Biden, I mean, this was not, obviously, people would talk about the Ukraine scandal, and that would cause him to be discussed more. But this was going on in August, even before the Ukraine scandal broke, this lopsided coverage. And the coverage that there was of Bernie Sanders was far more likely to be negative than it was for either Warren or for Biden. This is the reason that this is so important as well is, I'm sure many of your listeners watch MSNBC, but it's the most watched network amongst liberals, and it is the network that is poised to have the biggest impact on the 2020 Democratic primary, because these are likely Democratic voters. These are ones who are engaged right now. And this type of coverage will have a big influence, because this is the only, source of information on these. People are not watching necessarily CNN or Fox News, and they're certainly not reading In These Times or the Chicago Reader. So they're not, getting access to what's going on. And during this period, Bernie Sanders was between number 2 and number 3 in the polls. The amount of coverage, the lack of coverage that he got, and the amount of it that was negative and critical about him, not just about his age, about all different aspects of Senator Sanders. And it was so focused on polls and electability, and very devoid of policy discussion, which is the thing that's actually going to impact Americans' lives. That's what's my broader problem with the media landscape right now and how electoral coverage operates, is that it focuses so much on trying to make the viewers pundits themselves. So they're trying to see,
yes.
who's up and down, and that's how we have to think about it. He's more likely to win, rather than who you want to win, rather than who you support and what your politics line up with. And I think that was very much reflected in this coverage as well. So I worked on the story, editing it, and have a little intro in the magazine. But overall, this was, we had researchers going through and watching these clips, and reading through the transcripts and everything. And we feature a lot of them on the story. So it's live at inthesetimes.com right now. I encourage folks to read it. But I think that it's also very important that we take a step back and see this as part of a broader approach to Bernie Sanders' candidacy by the media, which comes out of the fact that a lot of the people that are, guiding this media coverage, not necessarily all the journalists themselves, but certainly the punditry class and the people that own these corporate media outlets, have an issue with the type of agenda that Bernie Sanders is pushing and the way that he is building his campaign, which talks about, a political revolution, talks about taking on the corporate elites and the ruling class, which talks about providing an alternative to the neoliberal market-driven framework that has guided American politics for at least the past 4 decades. So I think that it's really this viewing Bernie Sanders as a threat, and that's why it's a throwback to 2016. That's why so many of us see, it's just a redux, because we saw what happened 4 years back in 2016 and the lack of airtime given to Bernie Sanders. I mean, you remember I think it was March 15th of 2016, and Bernie Sanders giving a fiery speech to supporters in Phoenix, Arizona, and all of the major cable networks, so CNN, MSNBC, and Fox News, cut away from that speech. This is the middle of the primary, and they showed an empty podium that was awaiting Donald Trump. And that was just, how the media covered the race that time, was just, giving free network airtime to Donald Trump because they thought, people want to see Trump. And Lord knows, we don't want to be giving free airtime to Sanders. They cut away from Bernie Sanders, show an empty podium. So I think that it's important to keep in mind that this is part of a larger ecosystem.
Now, let's talk about that ecosystem. Break down the example you just gave. I've forgotten that example. I don't even know if I ever knew that example. I can't remember what I knew.
I sadly have, stuck up there.
All right. So just when I listen to that, your analysis of what went down, it seems to me there's a couple things being at play there. One is the pure entertainment factor of Donald Trump. Putting it all aside, Donald Trump is quote unquote entertaining. He's a character. He lies. He makes up names about other people. He breaks all the rules of conventional politicking. He is a celebrity. He hangs out with rich people. He himself is rich. His name is everywhere. Yeah. So there's an entertainment factor. And so part of that is Donald Trump's about to speak. Everybody wants to hear what he has to say, even if they disagree with him, because he drives the talk. And whereas Bernie, is not entertaining? Bernie is like eating your vegetables. Bernie is this really weird, abnormal person for what is American politics. Yeah. And so that's different than an ideological reason.
I think that's partially true, but I think that I don't think that it's necessarily that the MSNBC or Fox News executives were like, Trump's going to be better for us and our business models, so that's why we're going to show him. I think there's all kinds of reasons that went into that, but I definitely think that, people see Bernie Sanders saying a lot of the same lines he's said for now, his past 30 years in public life, and say, that's boring, or that's not what the people want. But when you look at the fact that he has, the biggest rally of the entire campaign season with 26,000 people in New York, and that he's, has the biggest rallies in Iowa now that, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez was down there with him last weekend. He's got over 1 million donors and volunteers. He's got the biggest, campaign set up in many of the early states of any candidate. There's people excited about it. It's not as if there's not grassroots, genuine excitement, but that's happening despite the media's lack of coverage, not because they're giving him free airtime, which is what happened to Donald Trump. There wasn't this massive grassroots movement behind Donald Trump. He was just everywhere you looked on the media. And, people thought, oh, it's him or, crooked Hillary now is what we have to deal with. And because they weren't given Bernie Sanders as an option. And that's why I think you'll see that as this primary continues on, and now we have a new entrant, Deval Patrick, who I could go on about.
We'll get to that later, yeah.
But that's, I think you're going to continue to see this trend of Bernie Sanders being sidelined, and that means that there has to be not just alternative media organs to actually talk about this, the ideas he's talking about. Like just today, him and AOC came out with this big housing plan to reinvest in public housing, Green New Deal for housing. Not only does that need to happen, but we need to call out these omissions by the corporate media when they happen, because otherwise people will just accept it as this is just how it goes. Bernie Sanders is second in a poll, and the media covers it as, Biden has Buttigieg has a strong fourth place showing and then we have Biden and Warren up top, and don't even mention Bernie Sanders is going on in the headlines. We need to call that out because it's not just anecdotal. That's what I'm saying, is it's part of not just a trend, but the approach to this campaign that has been done by all types of corporate media outlets.
Well, I had a light go off in my head. I'll apropos to everything you just got finished saying, which occurred to me last weekend when I sat down to read the New York Times. And I was, as always, I read everybody, okay? All sides of the aisle to figure out, maybe they can convince me of something. And in particular, I'm really curious about how the best political minds in this country think what will it take to defeat Donald Trump? So what should the Democrats do to defeat Donald Trump? So as such, I had two alternatives in that newspaper that day. I had a gentleman named Timothy Egan, who is sort of left of center populist, and I had a gentleman named, and I'm blanking on his name, the right winger. Anyway, Brett Stevens, yes, who is a right winger but dislikes Donald Trump. Okay, so as such, he's basically a Republican. He represents that portion of the Republican Party that's embarrassed by Donald Trump and wants to vote for an alternative, but he cannot, from an ideological standpoint, stomach any of the Democrats. So, which is a curious thing. Let's pause to think about this one for a second, Miles. Why are there no hold your nose and vote for whoever the Democrats put up Republicans? What do they care about the ideology of the Democrat? If you believe that Donald Trump is a lying sack of beep and is really detrimental to the future of mankind.
Thank you for cleaning that up.
Come on.
I thought that was you, Dennis.
Yeah.
Just working quick.
He knows. It's like he pushes a button, beep. And if that's what you believe, then why wouldn't you vote? Even if you're Brett Stevens and you're right of center, you would vote for Bernie Sanders and then immediately use all the powers at your command to stifle Bernie Sanders from getting his agenda through. Yeah. That's politics. But why would you feel compelled to totally bash?
Yeah.
Anyway,
well, you've seen this whole. There's a whole cottage industry of Republicans who now have become like Democratic analysts that are all commenting on 2020 and what Democrats should do, as if these people that are diametrically opposed to the Democratic Party and Democrats winning power are the best people we should turn to for advice about you get that. And the sad thing is, and we've talked about this before, is you watch this week on ABC, and it's Chris Christie is giving Democrats advice, for one, who's one of Donald Trump's closest confidants, and then Rahm Emanuel is all we have to represent the alternative viewpoint, and he's talking about how Medicare for all is the wrong way to go when he's making money off of the private insurance industry.
So this is the conclusion I've reached, and that is the whole discussion of electability is largely a ruse to distract people from the fact that the pundits or editorial writers who are talking about electability, or the talking heads, do not like the positions and policies that the Bernie Sanders people are espousing. Yeah. And they oppose the policies, but instead of coming out and saying they oppose the policies, what they tell their readers and their listeners is that he can't possibly win.
Yeah.
And I would have more respect for them if they came out and said, this is why I think these policies are bad for a country. I would probably vehemently disagree with them, as I do, but the whole notion of electability, I just think, is a phony issue. And this came home to me when I was reading this this column by Timothy Egan, where he talked about his sister, who is a Walmart worker in Oregon and is barely above poverty. And she voted for, according to Egan, she voted for Donald Trump and is probably going to vote for Donald Trump again. All right. And mainly because she despises the scolding attitude of elitist Democrats who are always trying to tell people like her that there's something wrong with her for supporting a Republican who is advocating policies that are against her best interests. So just think about this. This is how extreme she is. She despises Democrats because they're mad at her because she's voting for Donald Trump. So the only Democrat she would support would be someone who wouldn't scold her. And really, the only Democrat, or the number one guy on that chart, if that's your thing, would be Bernie Sanders, because he's made it clear from the get-go, Miles, that he doesn't hold a grudge against Trump voters. He pisses off some of his lefty liberal supporters by saying that.
Of course, when he went on Fox News, and that's what's so, when he went on Fox News and did that town hall, that was like the most, fair coverage that network has ever given him, because it was just him getting to talk to people. And you remember, he famously, the host, Brett Baer, I forget who it was, said, who in here supports Medicare for all? And all the people's hands went up. He also did a
that was
town.
awesome.
It was pretty good. He also did a town hall in West Virginia, talking to former coal mine workers and people that had been, that would face some consequences as the result of a transition to renewable energy and, Medicare for all as well. And he just won these people over. If you watch that town hall, that's from over a year ago, but it's just incredible, the compassion that he presented. So I do agree, if you're worried about the Democrats being too scaring away Trump voters or just, shaming them or something, it's the least likely person to do that.
Least likely. And by the way, so Tim Egan, after laying this out, goes on to quote Barack Obama, who's criticizing the lefties for being woke. I don't know if you saw that Obama quote. It's every centrist I know is putting on his Facebook page. It's like porn for centrists. Yeah. Look at this. Whoa. I really look at Barack Obama said it. The ultimate centrist said, he's mad at lefties. They're always mad at lefties. You
remember they coined that term. It was Robert Gibbs called it the establishment left. That was his term when he was Obama's press secretary. So it's been that's been a long term issue that Obama's had this axe to grind against the lefties.
Against lefties. By the way, who elected him? Barack Obama would not be had been president of the United States if it wasn't for the lefties in Iowa who viewed him as an anti-war candidate over Hillary Clinton on the issue, but this is the ancient history of the Iraqi war, because Obama was against it. And when those lefties in Iowa joined together to help him win the Iowa caucus, the next day, Black America woke up to the fact that white people were voting for Obama. Yeah, maybe we're looking for, you know what I mean? So kind of, for a guy who owes his career to lefties, boy, he's just sure a funny way. But here's the deal. Egan did not offer up in his column Bernie Sanders as an alternative. He talks about Pete Buttigieg, this, that, the other thing, And I'm like, why? The obvious choice as for someone who would appeal to your sister would be Bernie. No, it doesn't even mention Bernie. And then across the page, you got old boy Stevens extolling the virtues of Michael Bloomberg. Finally, a Democrat I could vote for is Stevens' attitude. Michael Bloomberg. I'm like, Michael Bloomberg would be the last Democrat in the world that Tim Egan's sister would vote for.
But you know what? Who would vote for him is Jeff Bezos, who had the secret call with him weeks ago, encouraging Bloomberg to enter the race.
How did I miss that?
It's true. The wealthiest man in the on Earth.
Watching that movie.
Wait,
called it-
time out. Talk about that a little. I did not know about the call.
This is, as Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez called it, real class solidarity. Here is you have Jeff Bezos, who's the richest man in the world, this multi-billionaire, has got what, $107 billion. No, that's Bill Gates has $107 billion. Bezos has even more. Called up Michael Bloomberg and really encouraged him to enter the race, and lo and behold, he's signed up for the Alabama primary at the least. So he's definitely getting his feet in the water, and he's ready to go to be the. And what's funny is there's already a different billionaire in the race, Tom Steyer, who it's like as if the billionaires need another candidate in the race, and then obviously Donald Trump is a billionaire as well. So
we don't know about that.
Yeah,
we're waiting
fair.
for those income tax returns to come out. They may come out, So
I think that just shows that this is. I think that it relates to why Deval Patrick got in the race today. He was so close with Barack Obama and Michelle Obama. I mean, he is one of their closest friends, and he was the governor of Massachusetts for 2 terms. And he comes from some of the same background as Obama. He is from also Chicago, which he talks about a lot. He's from the south side of Chicago before he moved over to Boston and got involved in politics there. But he's also the classic kind of Rahm Emanuel style politician, where he's got his entire career has been based off of working for firms. And, right now he's most recently been working for Bain Capital, which is of the infamous, Mitt Romney past. And then also he worked for this foreclosure firm where he was making $360,000 for AmeriQuest, which was one of the largest lenders during the housing bubble, and then was one of the biggest players in pushing people out of their homes in the foreclosure crisis. And this is where Deval Patrick was getting his money. So he's another, I think, entrant who's going to try to take that centrist lane. And I think it speaks to the fact that they're pretty worried. Like, they see what's going on and where things are falling. And forget who it was. Somebody called Biden right now is kind of wet tinder. He's like, he does not seem like the kind of person you expect to have a spark. Can't imagine him building up more support than he has now. And certainly Deval Patrick's entrance in the race is going to affect his popularity among black voters. And so they're like, what are we going to do? We need to get somebody else, because otherwise it's Bernie and Warren. And they really don't want Bernie Sanders or Elizabeth Warren to be the nominee.
Just think about this. Patrick was the one who said the process is cruel. I'm not getting in the race, and now he's jumping in the race. Mike Bloomberg had ruled out running. Now he's jumping in the race.
So something's motivating them, and it's looking at the polls and seeing, look, we're just a few months away. This is coming up soon. So if they want to stop.
Say it. If they want to stop,
if they want to stop Bernie Sanders, this is what they have to do. And
Yeah.
so I think that's ultimately in the back, because that's what Deval Patrick said today. He's not for Medicare for all. He wants to reduce student debt, but he doesn't like the plans that are out there. He thinks we don't know. He doesn't know if we really need a wealth tax. His wealth isn't the problem. Greed is the problem. He's providing an opportunity for all these people that want to occupy that centrist lane, that don't speak in the message of frankly class warfare that Bernie Sanders does, a place to go that's not Buttigieg or Kamala Harris.
Yeah. So it's a couple things. One, it's just personal ambition. Hey, I could win this thing. I see a path, so I'm going to do it. And it's also dressed up as concern about the electability. Again, they'll be running. They'll say it's Bernie is unelectable, but in reality, they're running to defend these interests.
Yeah.
And
Well, because the programs are popular. That's the thing, is they can't criticize. I mean, even that's why when we talk about Rahm Emanuel's cynical criticisms of Medicare for all, he says it's going to strip healthcare, which is so dishonest and a complete misreading. It's going to, take on the insurance industry, which has been gobbling up $100 billion in profit every year. That's what it's going to do. Like, that's the reason that they are opposed to it, but they won't say that. So they make up these, and they won't do that about these other issues like student debt or like tuition-free college or like a $15 minimum wage. These incredibly popular programs, which is exactly what Bernie and the left lane are running on. They can't do that. So exactly, that's the much easier point, is to say, look, we have the most dangerous president ever, and we can't risk a Bernie Sanders. We got to go with Joe Biden, who can't do events at night because his brain hurts.
Well, and yeah, so the person that was sort of identified as the centrist candidate is obviously failing the test of running a campaign. So other people see this as a great opportunity for them to jump into the race. That point is obvious. But I also have to point this out. If Bernie Sanders were elected president and on a platform of Medicare for all, free college, et cetera, and so forth, that at this point is so obvious, but I have to make it, is absolutely no guarantee that any of the programs he ran on would pass.
Yeah.
And so all the moderates who are afraid of those programs could then turn around and fight them if they wanted to. I'm not saying they should. I'm just saying if they wanted to, if they thought it was in the best interest of the country to try to block Bernie Sanders for imposing a Medicare for all plan, they could fight it. So it's not like the notion that they have to scare Americans into worrying about something that Bernie Sanders is proposing is nonsense. Do you follow me?
Yeah. Well, also, I mean, I think that the promise of having somebody like Bernie in office is like, look what happened with Trump, right? The Republicans all hated Trump. They did everything they could to stop him, to blunt his momentum, to, push Ted Cruz at the end of that campaign to make him the Republican nominee. And yet, when Trump got the nomination and then got inaugurated as president, they all fell in line, and they're not speaking out against his policies. The most you'll get is Lindsey Graham's being upset about, pulling troops from Syria, but they didn't do anything to stop it. They're not doing anything to stop his continued support of Saudi Arabia during the devastating Yemen war. The Republicans are falling in line completely with this person that they pushed so hard against. So I think that it would make sense for Democrats to take a look at that and see, like, look, maybe if we believe in the type of things we're talking about, which is, everybody deserves health care, and that, we got to present a program to build up middle-class jobs and reinvest in infrastructure and all the things that are just classic Democratic Party taglines, then we should support the person that's the most likely to actually be willing to risk and put on the line implementing those things, because that's the only way to push back against this rightward lurch that we've seen in the country in recent years. And if you're angry at Bernie Sanders for, being too outside of the establishment, just look at what Donald Trump was able to do by saying he was the outsider, anti-establishment candidate. That, in a general election, I think is a big benefit to rather than a problem with your electoral capabilities and your likelihood of winning.
Well, I would say this. If Bernie Sanders were somehow or other elected president of the United States, I do not believe Democrats would fall in line behind Bernie the way Republicans have fallen in line behind Trump. I believe that, first of all, there's two different mentalities, the Democratic mentality and the Republican mentality. The Republicans are fall in line creatures. And also Donald Trump, if he's good at anything, it's at bullying people into falling in line. He is such a good bully. He somehow or other bullied the city of Chicago to allow to put his name on that building, which is in violation of every taste standard.
Yeah.
No other building has a sign that big. And by the way, it came after he gave $50,000 campaign donation to one Mayor Rahm Emanuel. Let's not forget that. The same Mayor Rahm Emanuel was up there with Chris Christie giving advice to Democrats.
Trump famously said once, I like Rahm.
Thank you, Ron.
So Trump's good at bullying people. I don't see Bernie having the same power. I didn't Barack Obama. The Democrats did not fall in line behind Barack Obama in any way, the way Republicans have fallen in line behind Donald Trump. I could tell you right now that they certainly didn't fall in line. There were certain more, let's put it this way, the Democrats were far more, quote unquote, objective about Barack Obama's policies, for better or for worse, than Republicans are about this impeachment going on.
Yeah.
So, all right, anyway, David Seaton has joined us. He's my next guest, and I'm really happy to bring him on. Before I do, Miles Kampf-Lassin, give folks all the information they should know about you, to follow you, read your stories, et cetera, and so forth.
Sure. Check out that story. It's called MSNBC's Bernie Blackout. It's on inthesetimes.com right now. Just went live this morning. I will be check out In These Times for my writing in the future. Follow me on Twitter at Miles K. Lassin. And yeah, that's about it.
All right, one last thing before I let you go. Dennis, look over there. Are you excited about the Bulls?
Look, that Kobe White game, I'm kicking myself for not going on Tuesday because I bet the UC was bumping, Kobe.
Hey, there was nothing over there. You guys talking about sports?
No, look over there.
Might be able to take out the Bucks. I don't know. What I am also excited about is, they're trying out these teams. They're trying out Kaepernick with these teams. The Bears need a quarterback. Saturday, they're going to scout him. I think.
Wait, time out. Hold it.
Stephen A. Smith was talking, but this is the Bears' best chance.
Wait, time out. Hold it. I've been in the bubble. I did not see this. Are you telling me that the Chicago Bears are actually going to send a scout? The Bears? I don't believe it.
It's happening on Saturday.
I know it's happening on Saturday. I know that he's giving a general tryout. Yeah. But my belief about the Chicago Bears, and I'm a lifelong Chicago Bear fan. Looking at David Seaton right now. I don't know if he's a sports fan, but I'm a lifelong Chicago Bear fan. And the Bears have issues with black quarterbacks. I'm just putting it out there, David Seaton. I'm putting it out there. They did not. They had a chance to get Deshaun Watson. I can go on and on, but Dennis is getting mad. There's a political edge to this.
Come on, boys.
There definitely is.
They took Mitch Trubisky, man. Come on.
Well, the other person that signaled interest is Cam Newton, who would be another, so who knows?
Dennis once said Cam Newton. Remember my face lit up? Like, we can get Cam Newton?
Oh, I'm pulling for Kaepernick, but I also, I am the eternal optimist. I don't think this is the Bulls' year, but I think that there's some good things happening. And Wendell Carter Jr. and Kobe White are the two.
I was there Tuesday.
Oh, you were there?
Yes, I was, and I was like, yeah, put the rookie in, and they put him in. He hit the 7 threes. I was so happy.
All right, boys, that's your sports talk for today.
All right, anyway,
Thanks,
thank you so much, Miles, and we'll move on with David Seaton after this break.
The Ben Joravsky Show is supported by Northwestern University's part-time master's program in literature and liberal studies. Students learn from dynamic and diverse faculty as they build advanced skills for critical analysis, writing, and research. Evening classes are held on Northwestern's Evanston and Chicago campuses. The spring quarter application deadline is January 15th. Learn more at sps.northwestern.edu/masters.
Did you know that 40% of the people in Illinois opt to be cremated? Well, it's true. And Chicagoland Cremation Options honors their wishes by providing cremation services directly to the general public. Chicagoland Cremation Options provides an affordable, ethical, and easy cremation arrangement, whether in person or online. Save thousands and streamline the process by going directly to Chicagoland Cremation Options. It's a family-owned business operated by my good friend, Douglas Klein. Here's how you reach them. ChicagolandCremationOptions.com. One more time, ChicagolandCremationOptions.com.
It's Chicagoland's adult entertainment playground. It's the world-famous Admiral Theater, 3940 West Lawrence Avenue. The Admiral is homegrown from Chicago, and it's the most conveniently located club in all of the city. 15 minutes from the O'Hare Airport in downtown Chicago Loop. Voted Chicago's best strip club, the Admiral has showgirls galore and a variety of adult entertainment shows. The world-famous Admiral Theater, open every day from 7 p.m. to 6 a.m., 3940 West Lawrence Avenue. For events, showtime, and other information, visit AdmiralX.com. Must be 18 years of age or older to enter.
Hey, podcast fans. That's you, right? You're listening to this, so I'm assuming you're a podcast fan. Well, hey, the Sun-Times political web series, The Fran Spielman Show, is now available as a podcast. Have you checked it out yet? Yeah? What'd you think? Pretty good? What's that? No? Oh, my God, you got to check it out. The Fran Spielman Show features weekly interviews with the lawmakers, journalists, and others who are shaping our city. Fran, she holds nothing back. I was there watching her do the interview last week. She held nothing back. She goes deep into City Hall to bring you the real scoop on Chicago politics. And now you, that's YOU, can listen to her show on all of your favorite podcast apps. Head to City Hall with Fran and get even more great political coverage from the Chicago Sun-Times. Listen and subscribe now at suntimes.com/Fran-show. One more time, that's suntimes.com/FRAN-show. The BEN Joravsky Show. Hour number 2 is just moments away. But before we get into that, we need to thank the following unions for sponsoring our program. First up, it's the International Association of Machinists and Aerospace Workers, Local 126 and District 8, the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, Local 9, and the International Union of Operating Engineers, Local 150. These unions are awesome. Thank you for sponsoring our show. And, of course, today's show is brought to you by our good friends at the Chicago Federation of Labor. Hour number 2. Let's do it. It is Thursday, November 14th, and live from the Chicago Sun-Times Chicago Reader Studio on Racine Avenue, this is the Ben Joravsky Show. In this hour of the program, it's the return of co-host of WVON's Seaton and Buchanan. It's Seaton, David Seaton. And now your host of the Ben Joravsky Show, it's Ben Joravsky.
David Seaton is in the studio. David Seaton, the pride and joy of Proviso West High School, is in the studio, and we'll get to him. But first, D, you got an update?
Absolutely, I do here. We have an update. Yeah, it turns out we had a veto session today, and it looks like we have a few veto session updates.
Oh, okay.
Ben, don't look too excited.
I love a veto session.
All right, so let's read what we got here. The following comes from some fella named Finke in the Springfield Journal-Register. Ben, do you read the Springfield Journal-Register at all?
Not lately.
Oh, so you don't know nothing much about Finke?
No. Nope.
All right, well, it says here, Governor J.B. Pritzker secured his top veto session priority when the Illinois Senate gave final approval to a bill consolidating downstate police and fire pension systems. The Senate voted 42-12 on Senate Bill 1300, which has been touted by supporters as a way to improve investment returns for hundreds of systems, which would in turn help take pressure off of local property taxes that help pay for them. We have some more updates here. A bill capping out-of-pocket insulin cost at $100 a month is up for Governor J.B. Pritzker's signature. The Senate voted 43-1 to give final approval to that bill. The chamber had to approve a couple of minor changes made to the legislation in the House. Let's see here. We have more. Illinois lawmakers are one step closer to approving permanent daylight savings time.
I'm with that 100%.
What do you think about that, David?
I don't know how they're going to get away with that one.
Okay.
Don't they do that in Arizona?
They have it. They do it in 2 states, Arizona and one other state.
Wow. How did you know that? David Seaton, how did you know there were 2? I knew it was Arizona.
I was going to say, it says here, only Arizona and Hawaii residents are free from the biannual
Hawaii.
Clock tinkering that comes with daylight savings time.
I hate daylight savings.
It's the worst.
It sucks.
Let's see here. Oh, wow, being very candid this afternoon. Bills aimed at curbing where Illinoisans can use electronic smoking devices and with what flavorings appear halted until the spring session of the General Assembly. And looks like that's all the updates we got there. So.
All right. Part of my problem, David Seaton, with daylight savings time, I have a confession to make. I'm dyslexic, so I'm always confused. The confessional music. I'm always confused. All right, wait, is it going up? Is it going back? And then, it's just, man, and then the clock. And then it took like a week to get this clock over here that on the wall. We have 2 clocks on the wall, and nobody updated them. So I'm like, wait a minute, where are we? Finally, I did it. I went updated. very mechanical guy.
I used to hate daylight savings time as a kid because I had to go to church 8 days a week. So on Sunday, I said 8 days a week.
Yeah. I was
So
like,
so on Sunday, the first service would be at 8 a.m. So in the spring, when you spring forward, I would have to be up at 7 a.m. And because the time changes, late, 2 a.m. on Sunday. So I just used to dread that.
do you still go to church every week?
I do not.
Okay, that's a subject for another time.
I'd be happy to have that conversation.
Wow. Okay, that's interesting. We stay a lot away from theological discussions on the Ben Joravsky Show.
Because you go every week. Right, Ben?
Every day. Every day. Every day. Okay. Yeah, so we stay away from. I'm not a big practitioner of any religion. I'm Jewish, but I don't really practice take really out of that sentence. So, but I respect everybody. They got the religious beliefs, so long they're not intolerant and they're not preaching hate. And
we could. That's why I could talk about this all day, because unfortunately we've got a theocracy in this country on the right, and that's where the issue comes in when people try to take their personal beliefs and their personal interpretations and then try to legislate for the population.
Now, okay, every guest that comes on this show, we have a text exchange, a phone conversation before we do the show over what are we going to talk about? And this was not on the list, but I cannot resist it. So allow me to just take a little moment to have you take a little deeper dive in this. So did a light go on? Like you said, you grew up as a churchgoer. You were going to church. You said 8 days a week. I presume you were joking. 7 days a week.
No, it was 8 days
yeah.
a week.
There's a song they wrote about it. 8 days a week. All right. So you went to church all the time.
Correct.
And so did a light go on at some point?
At some point, I had some distance. I had enough distance from church, and it just happened just because of how life happens. But I had enough distance that I was able to look at it through just I was able to evaluate it critically, and that's unfortunately what happens when you're indoctrinated in church, and that's why I can empathize with people on the right. If you are brought up in the church, the two things that you are taught is that, number one, you can't question God, and because your pastor or your bishop or whatever you call him is an emissary of God, you by extension cannot question that individual. So if you grow up in the church from a very young age, you never critically evaluate, why do I believe? You can tell people who, what, when, where, and why, but you can never answer, who, what, when, where, but you can never answer why you believe what you believe. And that's what's more important. So once I got to a point in my life that I was able to have some distance and I was able to critically evaluate, why am I doing the things that I'm doing? That's what brought me to the place where I am now, where I no longer am religious.
And
David, would it be safe to say you once were blind, but now you see?
I think that ironically enough.
yeah.
Correct.
Interesting.
He kind of flipped the switch on you. But that is actually, I was blind and now can see, is a really profound line that I think about actually a lot. I remember when, of course, Barack Obama was singing it and destroying the song Amazing Grace. But the notion that you have a revelation, and that revelation is profound and life-changing. Now, in that song, it has to do with a slaver coming to realize that that's a unjust and sinful existence. And so it's like a really profound, life-changing for the good, I would say, and that you can change. Your case, you went away from religion when you had when you suddenly saw.
And again, speaking as an African-American man who grew up in a Southern Baptist denomination of Christianity, it's amazing to me how African-Americans and European Americans, Caucasians and black people in this country, for the most part, Christianity, I think people in this country are about 71% Christian, and, people go to church on Sunday, they read the same book, they're praying to the same God, but their ideas about fundamental right and wrong and who should have the right to do, the interpretation is so, I mean, it's 180 degrees opposite. So again, that's part of my awakening is that how could I and this other individual be reading the exact same book, praying to the same God, believing the same core things, but then when we walk outside of the church, our ideas and our worldviews are completely different. So if you believe that religion is what it is and that God is who he is and the basic tenets of the Christian faith, that should supersede your cultural identity. But unfortunately in this country it doesn't.
Well, it's interesting. These things are on my mind a lot. Last night I've been talking about this all day. I saw Godfather 2 again, and I don't know if you've ever seen Godfather 2, but I've been talking so much about how the movie's about lies, how people lie all the time. But another big part of that movie is the way in which the mobsters sort of buy their penance through the Catholic Church. So they'll use religious rituals to sort of cover up their murders. So, for instance, they'll be in church while their henchmen are out slaughtering their rivals, or after having slaughtered their rivals, they'll make a contribution to the church to buy their penance. In other words, they have this faith in this church. They abide by these rules of the church when they're within the church, and then in their everyday life, they're completely contradicting all the rules that the church promulgates.
So the one thing you can take away from that movie that is applicable to the time in which we find ourselves is that one of the other underlying tenets of the movie is blind, obsequious fealty. You cannot question the order. If the Godfather says to do something, you must do it. And it's that same brain wiring that we see right now in the Republican Party. That it's that same obsequious sycophancy that we see on the right. That even in the face of incontrovertible truths, these individuals cannot say they just cannot say what's right and wrong. They have to put their finger in the wind. They have to, right before they speak, they kind of look at Trump or they're looking at their phone to see what he tweeted, and okay, now I know what I can say. And that's the it's that right wing, it's that religious wiring of the brain that says I cannot question the authority that is sending us where we're on our way to where we're going.
All right, when you were coming in, I was talking to Miles about the difference between Democrats and Republicans and how they deal with their presidents. And I predicted that Democrats would not fall in line with any president that got elected the way Republicans have fallen in line with Donald Trump, following that Godfather-like adherence to whatever the boss says.
Democrats fall in love, Republicans fall in line.
That's correct.
and there's something to be said for that, because the Republicans have done an exceptional job since Ronald Reagan. That they have, and part and parcel because they've interwoven themselves with the evangelical church. But you can distill the entire Republican ideology down to about 3 or 4 things: lower taxes, less regulation, guns, get rid of abortion, and gay marriage. Those are really the 5 things that they talk about.
Run them down one more time. I'm taking notes.
They talk about lower taxes and regulation.
Yep.
Get rid of homosexual marriage, get rid of abortion, and guns for everyone. Those are their 5 topics. And I don't care if you look at Reagan, if you look at George Bush Sr., Bush Jr., or Trump. All of their messages can be distilled, or all of their major touch points can be kind of categorized within those 5 subjects. And when you have a very simple message like that, and they have the added benefit of 85% of Republicans are white. I would even say I would venture to say it's probably a little higher than that, but the last data that I saw, it's around 87%. So they are racially homogenous. They have a very simple message, and their message is amplified through the right-wing evangelical church. So they've created an echo chamber, this self-enforcing, cyclic message that they hear it on Sunday, then they go out and they hear it, and they all, they're Fox News on Monday through Saturday, church on Sunday, and so this self-enforcing echo chamber just tells them the same thing. So you combine that with being racially homogenous, then it's easier to understand how they can be so monolithic. But on the left, you've got people who are racially heterogeneous. We've got all races, all creeds, all colors, all sexual orientations. Everybody goes to the Democratic Party because the identity of the Republican Party is even on its face, even if they don't say it, and they do. But even when they don't say it, it appears to be very exclusionary.
And what you're saying, man, I'm really picking up on it, because think about this. You talk about the diversity in the Democratic Party. If you're on the Democratic side, you have a very diverse party with people a lot of different viewpoints, people a lot of different backgrounds, ethnic backgrounds, racial backgrounds, religious backgrounds. You have to, in general, be respectful of them, because you want to keep them in the party together, and you just want to be respectful of other people that you basically agree with.
Sure.
Republicans mock that respect that Democrats show for people within their party. They call it political correctness.
Correct.
They say you're allowing people to be snowflakes. So when a Democrat says something, backs off, tries to rethink his or her position on any issue, like gender identity, Republicans mock that, right? But God forbid anybody mock those 4 tenets that you just espoused, then you're being intolerant.
Exactly.
You're being an elitist. You're not respecting another person's
establishment,
religious belief, like their most sacred religious belief.
The difference between when you're talking about religion, and that's the one that's kind of was the catalyst to this conversation that's funny, is that Republicans have convinced themselves that because someone else has a different opinion, that is infringing upon their religious liberty. That was, you remember when the first states were talking about making gay marriage legal, the right, their whole objection to it was, well, now you're redefining marriage and you're infringing upon my freedom to. No, we're not. If a gay couple is living next door, as long as that gay couple doesn't come into your bedroom and tell you what to do and with whom to do it, you're free to do whatever you want to do. But that's the place where we find ourselves, that when my freedom encroaches upon your freedom, then there's a problem. Yeah. As long as I can, if you and I can be free and we don't have to curtail one another's freedom, then that's ideally what you want. But the religious right, they don't want that. They want because they believe, and let me just say parenthetically that nowhere in the Bible does it discuss abortion. As a matter of fact, one could go so far as to say, if you go into the Mosaic Law, and again, I know this because I went to church 8 days a week, but if you read Exodus, the 20th chapter and the 21st verse, it basically says that the life of an unborn child, this is under the Mosaic Law, the life of an unborn child is not equal to a person who's alive and walking around. There's a very specific Mosaic law in there that says if two men strive and they hurt a woman and they cause her fruit to be, they cause her to lose her fruit or her unborn child, it says you have to take the guy to a judge and pay a fine. Mm-hmm. It says, but if two men strive and you cause the woman to die, then someone has to die, because it's life for a life, eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. So even the Bible so again, the whole thing about the Bible and Jesus and God being anti-abortion, there's nothing in the Bible that talks about anti-abortion. So I'll stop there. But my point is that people on the left say, hey, if you want to get an abortion, we want to make sure that they're safe, legal, and rare. Republicans say no one can get an abortion because that's what I believe. And that's where we find it. That's why I said we are really on the cusp. We are really in danger in this country of becoming the same kind of theocracy that we have used as the justification to go to war in the Middle East to say we're going to liberate the citizens of Muslim theocracies 10,000 miles away. But we're really, really close to becoming a Christian theocracy.
Wow. All right. Now, to that point, this popped into my mind. We've had a lot of discussion on this show with a councilman from South Bend, Indiana, Henry Davis, and who is an outspoken critic of Mayor Pete. And Henry Davis, I urge everybody, not now, but check out the interviews with Henry Davis. I think they're very interesting because Henry Davis is a councilman from the black neighborhood, one of the black wards in South Bend. And his criticism of Mayor Pete is very similar to criticism, let's say, that you get in Chicago from black activists regarding Mayor Rahm back in the day, how he distributes money, how he deals with police brutality stuff, that kind of thing. So Mayor Pete is doing very poorly in the polls among black voters, but doing
Latino
voters, but doing relatively well among well-to-do liberals. All right, relatively well, and that's where his base is.
He's number one right now in the Iowa caucus.
I saw that. Yeah, now they're all within the margin of error. Yeah,
exactly.
so but he's right in the mix to win Iowa, and we could then talk about the irrelevancy ultimately of winning Iowa. Ultimately, David. But anyway, when I was listening to you, I thought back to my conversations with Henry and articles about Pete Buttigieg's relationship with the black community or lack thereof, and the advice that he was being given. And the advice that he's being given is to emphasize his faith, to emphasize the fact that he goes to church, that he is a believer, and that will win him support in the black community. And I'm like, okay, that is an interesting opinion about black voters. There's a lot.
Going back to the 5 tenets, the Republican Party, Donald Trump is paying people to hold these shirts up saying "Blacks for Trump," and he goes down to Atlanta and he spoke to a far right wing black, or he was speaking to black conservatives down there. Republicans or conservatives, because it's important to make that distinction. I don't want to conflate the two because that's historically inaccurate. But Republicans, conservatives, they want to say, "Hey, come join our tent, as long as you believe what we believe." So in the case of a Mayor Pete, he's being advised by people that just have a very superficial, generally speaking, when you talk to non-people of color who are political strategists about how to get into the communities of people of color, they generally say, well, black people and Latinos are generally socially conservative. So if we just go out there and say no abortion and no gay marriage, that will resonate with with those communities because they typically skew socially conservative. But the problem with that is, and which is actually, I mean, that's actually counterintuitive, because the very reason that Mayor Pete is number one in the Iowa caucuses is because you have a high enough percentage of liberals who have had to reconcile whatever their feelings were about homosexuality. Why? Because they know someone who's gay, because they've got a son who's gay, or a daughter who's gay, or a relative who's gay, or a best friend. So they had to reevaluate their feelings about just making these blanket statements about a community. So that's what makes it counterintuitive, is to say that you would almost have to say two different messages if you're listening to that type of advice, because you've got white liberals who are accepting you despite the fact that you're gay, but then you're going to go out and espouse religiosity to people of color to get them to obfuscate the fact that you're gay, and even more than that, Mayor Pete has no chance whatsoever. The religious right would burn this country to a cinder before they would let an openly gay married man sit in the White House. That's not going. misogyny was one of the variables that kept Hillary Clinton from ultimately winning. So you think that these misogynist, far right-wing, ultra-conservative, fundamentalist Christians are going to then vote in a white, gay, married man?
But look what they do. They blame black people. And this thing, Henry Davis
For Hillary
and I
Clinton?
No. Okay, I jumped 2 steps ahead of you. Let me go back and catch up because Mayor Pete put out that poll. Somebody put it. I don't know if literally Mayor Pete. I came from his campaign. It was based on what do they call those things where they put like 10 people in a room?
Focus group.
Focus group. It's the biggest bunch of BS.
Focus,
in the
Ben,
world.
focus.
Yeah, focus group, and that said black people have a problem with him being gay. All right, and they had to work on that, and that was trying to sort of explain why he has abysmal support among black voters. All right, and this myth has been put out for so many years. I fight it all the time, and I will fight it until I can no longer speak. The notion that somehow or other black Americans are more anti-gay than any other group in this country.
There is a segment of fundamentalist, and when I say fundamentalist, I'm saying the people who read the Bible and they believe when it says that God created the heavens and the earth and everything in 6 days, that there are people in 2019 who teach that is literally true. Mm-hmm. There are people who teach that the universe is literally 6,000 years old. I had this conversation with a guy years ago when I was still in church, and this guy was an engineer by trade, and he and I were going back and forth about the Bible being literally true or not. And I said to him, You're an engineer by trade. There are things in the observable universe that are 6,001 light years away. So right there, that means that the universe is older than 6,000 years. And I said, even in the Bible, it says, the first verse says, "In the beginning." Yeah. We're talking about this omnipotent God. If he said "in the beginning," we don't know if that's 1 billion years ago or whatever. And he said, "Oh, so you believe in the gap theory?" So that's what I'm saying. But when you take fundamentalist Christians, so let's just take race out of it.
Yeah.
Fundamentalist Christians will look at someone who's homosexual, and the first thing they will say is, the Bible says that's an abomination.
Okay. All right.
The Bible says they don't mention eating shrimp being an abomination, or wearing clothing with different material, or swift feet running the again, I went to church 8 days a week, so I know this stuff. But there are abominations all throughout the Old Testament. Yeah. But the one thing that they pay attention, and then they will tell you that we don't even have to pay attention to the Old Testament because the Old Testament was the law. We live in the New Testament under grace. That's why Jesus died on the cross. So we don't even have to pay attention to the Old Testament. And the 2 times they will bring up the Old Testament is homosexuality. They'll say that homosexuality is an abomination. And then they will bring up tithing. That's their excuse for tithing. They go to Malachi 3:11 that says, "Bring the tithes into the storehouse, so there'll be meat in my house." Yeah. So for it's not a black fundamentalist Christian thing. It's a fundamentalist Christian thing that allows them the liberty to say, "Can't vote for Mayor Pete. He's gay." And the Bible says that's an abomination.
Right. So then what you said is true. It crosses over racial lines. So it's no more true of the black community than it is of the white community as a whole. That there's a segment of each community that has a deep-rooted opposition to homosexuality, and they will express that in a campaign.
But I tell you the 5 tenets were homosexuality.
Right, there you go.
Homosexuality is one of the 5 pillars.
Wait, there was 4. What was the 5th?
It's taxes.
Oh, and regulation.
Regulation.
So regulation is a separate one.
Right,
Gotcha.
those are separate.
Okay.
Then it's guns, gays, and God.
Gotcha.
Number 5.
Hey, David, you're really smart, man. You should host a radio show.
By the way, all right, let's take a break from this to say.
Wait, you do host a radio show. When is it?
You do host a radio show.
I co-host a radio show.
And when can that be heard?
I co-host a radio show with Atiba Buchanan on WVON 1690 AM, The Talk of Chicago, on Fridays from 9 p.m. to midnight.
Fridays, 9 a.m. until midnight. What's
9
the name of
p.m.
that?
to
Oh,
midnight.
9 p.m. until midnight.
9 a.m. to midnight. Jesus.
How you like radio?
He loves radio, ladies and gentlemen.
What's the name of that show?
The Buchanan and Seaton Show.
And we had discussed this with Atiba. How did his name go first? Was it alphabetical?
They got in a fight. They fought over it.
Yeah.
I was just phonically just saying, you know, Seaton and Buchanan because my name has 2 syllables and his has 3, and I'm musical. I play the piano and blah blah blah. So just musically, it made sense to it rolled off the tongue to say the Seaton and Buchanan Show. And then so we were taping the promos. He'd say the Buchanan and Seaton Show, and I'd say the Seaton and Buchanan Show. So we tried to turn it into a thing. But he actually came up with the show and with the idea and everything. And then he asked me to join him after he came up with it.
They are awesome, in my humble opinion. They've been coming on my show. God bless them. Ever since I had one, or ever since Dennis introduced me to Atiba, and so I'm really happy to hear that they have their own show and they're going to be superstars. I've been predicting that forever, and I'll be right about that.
Wait, Friday nights 9 until midnight
9 p.m. to midnight on Friday.
Yeah.
on WVON.
On WVON, 1690 a.m.
Yeah,
the Talk of Chicago.
Cool.
That he's brilliant at that. He
I
went
don't
to
know what you're
radio
talking
school.
about. I don't know what you're talking about.
And when we come back, David Seaton will tell us who the greatest piano player of all time is. We'll be right back after this.
The Ben Joravsky Show is supported by Northwestern University's part-time master's program in literature and liberal studies. Students learn from dynamic and diverse faculty as they build advanced skills for critical analysis, writing, and research. Evening classes are held on Northwestern's Evanston and Chicago campuses. The spring quarter application deadline is January 15th. Learn more at sps.northwestern.edu/masters.
But we got to get down to business.
Hey, everybody, it's football season. Ben, what's that noise you make? Ready, set, 40, 50? What is it?
Reset 2020.
Okay, ready, set, 2020. I forget it all the time. But it's football season, which means that the best sports reporters in Chicago want to offer you, our listeners, an exclusive deal on unlimited digital access to all of the stories that you love. The Sun-Times has always been your go-to source for sports, right? Right? Well, now the Chicago Sun-Times is a proud partner of the Chicago Bears, Ben's favorite football team in the world.
I love the Bears, but I don't like the way they run the Bears.
Okay, glass half full on this ad here. Come on. Don't miss a game this season. Get all the big plays, scores, and stories from the Chicago Sun-Times for a limited time only. YOU, can lock in our lowest rates yet, only $29.99 for a full year of all the news and sports that you need to know. Ben, one more time that noise.
Reset. Hut, 2020. I threw the hut in there.
Yeah, ready, set, hut, 2020. And ready, set, hut, $29.99 for a full year of unlimited access. You cannot do better than that. Take advantage of this exclusive deal now at suntimes.com/Ben. That's suntimes.com/ you guys can spell Ben, right? BEN. Welcome back to the Ben Joravsky Show. Mr. Joravsky, take us home.
We haven't done that one in a while. I love that one. That gets me to say, not only is David Seaton a brilliant analyst of politics, not only is David Seaton the co-host of his own talk show at WVON, not only is David Seaton the man, the myth, the legend, and the pride of joy of Proviso West, but he plays a mean keyboards, ladies and gentlemen.
Whoa.
Haven't done that one in a while.
He's good.
Yeah, I used to do that all the time. Would come in with that little, the whole thing, man. In my heart of hearts, David, I wish I could have been a radio DJ. I grew up listening obsessively to radio, and I never practiced this until late in life when I stumbled upon this job that
You want to try and hit the post?
I wish I could. Do you know what hit the post means?
I do not.
Young Dennis, show him.
Okay,
Come on, one more time.
Hit
man.
the post is when you listen to radio and you hear like the beginning, the intro of a song before the lyrics start, and the DJ will, coming up, da, 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 da,
Exactly.
and he'll end it right when the song starts.
Okay.
All right. So this is like a 15-second song. This is country. Ben, you don't want to try and
No,
hit
I
the
think
post?
because this is hard. This is
All right.
watch
this
this.
is just 15 seconds here. There's no vocals, but you get the idea. All right, this is a country song, so let's pick a country singer. Garth Brooks. Okay, good job, Ben. All right, here we go. You're listening to the Ben Joravsky Show. Coming up, your news, weather, and traffic, and so much more. But right now, Garth Brooks. He's got friends in low places. Turn it up.
He's
And
good.
then,
He's
you know
good,
what I mean?
man. He's good. He's
That's
good.
hitting the post.
That's hitting the post, man. I can't do that. I wish I. But you hear it all the time. Like we're driving on the road, we listen to classic rock, and these DJs have been hearing the same songs a million times, so they know the countdown before the voice kicks in. So the
Exactly.
music's going on. They're talking. Yeah, David Seaton's got his own show in 1690 WVON in Chicago with the T.B. Buchanan. Check it out.
Oh, that was good.
Oh, come on,
That was
man.
good.
I've listened to radio since I was a little itty bitty boy. All right, I didn't know you played the piano.
I do. I'm somewhere between a beginner and a novice.
Okay. I was thinking about that.
A Bagavis.
But you already told me who you think the greatest piano player of all time is, and that would be
Art Tatum,
jazz man.
jazz man from the 30s. He and again, as a pianist, to listen to him play, he was nicknamed the man with four hands, because he would play so quickly. And if you're a pianist and you're listening to him and you're trying to just imagine what he's doing to make this sound, and it's just one guy sitting at this 88 key piano, and he's just got two hands. So again, if you can Google him, or you could go on YouTube, and they, if they got some old stuff. But yeah, hands down, far and away, the best pianist in the world.
Well, some night I'll invite you over. I'm inviting you to my friend's house, Cap. We watch the games together, and then after the games, he's a huge musical. He knows more about music than I do, and he's got this beautiful sound system. We put on YouTube stuff, and a lot of it will be keyboarded. So he George Duke. I'm trying to think of some. He loves Oscar Peterson. Oscar Peterson, man, that guy can make the Billy Preston. And Joe Sample, I don't know if you know him. He's
Joe Sample, yeah,
Crusaders,
yeah,
Street
yeah.
Life, and so
Joe Sample was basically my guy from 1991. The decade of the 90s, when I went away to college. That was my.
Well, you went back in time, because Joe Sample was huge. I'm older than David, and
You're kidding. No.
Two generations on this young man. When this young man was just a wee lad in Westchester, wherever he grew up, I forget the time. I know he went to St. Joe, but I don't remember what town you're from.
Proviso West.
My bad. Did I say St. Joe?
You said St. Joe's. My daughter went to St. Joe's. Because now there's no more IHM, so St. Joe's is co-ed.
It's co-ed. That is correct. That's correct. Thank you, Robert Mueller. But anyway, back in the day when he was a wee lad going to some Proviso West feeder school, I was listening to the Crusaders and really digging that sound. Street Life. All right. Anyway, the other thing that you were going to talk about, we didn't talk about any of the things we said we were going to talk about.
Welcome to the Ben Joravsky Show.
Absolutely nothing. So much for preparation. Open window, throw out. Bernie Sanders. I spent a lot of time with Miles talking about Bernie Sanders. So we're going to introduce the thing you wanted to talk about, Bernie Sanders. But I'm really curious. I always tease David. He's a little to the right of the typical Ben Joravsky guest. He is a Democrat, and he fits within the spectrum of the Democratic Party. But you were one of the few guests who came on the show who had nice things to say about Joe Biden earlier on. I don't know if you still feel that way.
Tough to find you guys.
I do. I do feel the same way.
You still feel the same way. Well, what's your thoughts about all these quote-unquote moderate centrists? Patrick Duvall jumping in the race, Michael Bloomberg jumping in the race.
You know what? Before, and this is way before. This is when we were going toward the end of Obama, and it was still up in the air whether or not it was going to be Hillary or Joe Biden who was going to try and run. So way back then, before Kamala Harris got into the race in this cycle, it was my prediction that Joe Biden and Deval Patrick would have been the perfect.
I flipped it. I said, I flipped the dyslexia. Go ahead.
Yeah, I thought they would have been the dream ticket. And even now, him getting in the race as late as he is, the two things that he brings that he has that no one else has who's running is he has executive experience, having been the governor of Massachusetts, and the other thing that he brings, youth. Unfortunately, the top three people who are running are all in their 70s. And so he contrasts them with bringing his youth, and then he also contrasts Trump because of his youth and his executive experience.
All right. Now, so you're not upset that he jumps in, that he's undercutting Joe Biden? You don't think he's a Johnny-come-lately to this race?
I don't think so. I think it's presumptuous of us to say who can or can't or who should or shouldn't or when they get into the race. If he gets in this late, I think he might be strategically entering the race to shore up the centrist ideology so that it'll kind of help to weed out some of the more far left, extremely ultra progressive views that are being espoused. Because you were saying in the segment before I came on, and I've said this before as well, that if Elizabeth Warren and or Bernie Sanders get elected, unless they have a majority in the House and 61 Democratic senators in the Senate who are going to vote in lockstep with them, it doesn't matter what they say they're going to do. They can't do it without those voting majorities behind them. And the way that Donald Trump has seeded the judiciary, there's necessarily not even a guarantee that if he had, you could have 67, you could have a super majority, of Democrats in the Senate and have, the majority in the House. And one of Trump's judicial appointments could rule something unconstitutional. So we really have to be strategic in who we're going to put in the White House, and we definitely don't want to put someone like an Elizabeth Warren or Bernie Sanders just for namesake, just so we can win, to put them in there, and then they'll get in there 4 years, be unsuccessful, and then that'll give enough momentum for the right to come back and try to put someone Trump or Trump-like.
Well, the right's going to do that anyway. I mean,
They're
the right's going to come
anyway.
at them anyway.
Right, but the people who we're trying to get are those people in the middle. The people who are far right, they're going to vote for whoever's the Republican. The people on the far left are going to vote for whoever the Democrat is.
That's actually not true. The people on the far left won't vote. I have many friends of the far leftist persuasion who did not vote for Hillary Clinton. They either voted Green or they didn't vote at all. And
it happens on the right too, though.
Yeah, but it didn't happen enough in the state of Michigan and the state of Wisconsin and the state.
No, I'm saying if you go back to the election of 2008 when Barack Obama won, part of the reason that he won, and this is what people, it's important to keep this in a historical context. Part of the reason that he won was that the Republicans lost. Republicans were disenchanted with Bush. John McCain was an older guy, and he didn't. John McCain wasn't the fire in the Republican era. It was Sarah Palin that year. But Sarah Palin was enough of a dilettante and a nincompoop that and enough people. But you had people who stayed home because they were just disaffected Republicans and they had enough.
Not quite sure about the Republicans staying home in that election. Generally, the typical analysis from the 2008 election that Democrats just kind of foist on us is that Barack Obama was the kind of Democrat who could get Republicans to vote Democrat or independents to vote Democrat. In fact, David, I hear that so often now. We need a new Barack Obama. They talk about the Obama-Trump voters, which are voters who went for Obama in 08 and Trump in 16. And this is a point of analysis that I see in many articles where how can we get those Obama-Trump voters to go back to Democrat and leave Trump? So it's not that so much that Republicans stayed home because they were disenchanted. Barack Obama actually won over voters who would ordinarily vote Republican, and we saw that he won Ohio in 08. Indiana. Didn't he win Indiana? He won Indiana. Man, can you believe that?
But you have to remember that 2 years before he ran and won, in that midterm election in 2006, the Democrats took back the House. So there were Republicans who were disenchanted because of everything that was going on. They were tired of the Iraq War. They were tired of Bush being, dubbed as a dummy and would always misspeak. Then you had Katrina. Then you had the economy. You had a lot of things on the Republican side where the Republicans weren't enthusiastic to vote even before, because in 2006 at that midterm, Barack Obama hadn't even announced that he was running yet.
I must concede that that's a fair point. I remember the 2000s, the Democrats took the House and the Senate.
Correct.
And they gave all the credit in the House to Rahm, and I always laughed at that. Then, of course, they they quickly lost that House. What was it, in 2010? It was an avalanche.
It was an avalanche. But that was because of racism.
Explain that.
Because no one really believed that Barack Obama was going to win until he won. Kind of like what happened with Trump. And then Barack Obama and the Democratic Party, they used 100% of their goodwill that they had, and the only thing that they concentrated on during the first 6 months was the Affordable Care Act. So that gave you remember the talking points from the right about this is government trying to take over our health care, and they're coming out with death camps and blah 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 blah. So it was that was the cover that gave the Tea Party the cover to come in, and they came in 2010.
Here is how insane America is. In 2010, Republicans took the House by scaring America over Obamacare. In 2018, we're being told, Democrats took the House back by scaring America about Republicans taking away Obamacare. Americans are
dumb.
Schizophrenic.
No, they're dumb.
Dumb. Okay, you said it.
They're dumb. I mean,
You've just insulted the swing voters, David Seaton.
They need to be insulted. But the pendulum that we see swinging in the electorate going back and forth about the Affordable Care Act is no different than what happened when Social Security got introduced. It's no different than when the income tax got introduced in 1913. It's no different than every time we make this big social change, the people who are progressive enough to want to push it forward, then the populace, reacts and swings to the other side, and then somewhere in the middle, because now people get used to it and they realize, it's not anywhere scary as those people were trying to, now they're used to it. You go out there and try to tell people part of the reason, but one of the other reasons that Bush lost a lot of his cachet because he was trying to privatize Social Security.
Remember that?
He was trying to and senior citizens did, especially when you had the market crash. I remember that the whole year, the last year that Barack Obama was running, all the Democrats were saying, we're in a recession. Bush was saying, we're not in a recession. Look at the stock market. Then when the stock market crashed after the election in December of 2008, Bush came out and said, well, we've been in a recession for a year. Yeah, we've been in a recession for a year. So again, the pendulum swings like that because unfortunately the majority of the people who are out there are misinformed or underinformed.
Yeah, and not paying attention. And by the way, that recollection about Bush saying, "Oh yeah, we've been contradicting himself," fits into the theme of the day, which is politicians lie, which has come from The Godfather 2. All right, you had a clip, a news story that I haven't had a chance to talk about. It's a couple weeks old, but it is an interesting one, dealing with Bernie Sanders asked a question at a forum. D, you got it ready to go?
Absolutely, I do. David, once again, man, if you had a radio show, I'd listen to it. Oh, wait, you do?
Why don't you tune in to WVON 1690 AM, The Talk of Chicago, on Friday from 9 p.m. to midnight.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, that's right. You told us that earlier. You have a radio show.
You might hear us.
Hey, you're good. Here's Bernie.
Friday, he says he feels better than ever after undergoing heart surgery. Sanders is focusing his message in Iowa on his fight against corporate greed.
And you got to send me the time clips for these audio.
He tells
It's coming up.
CBS
It's
News
coming
he
up.
believes the wealthiest Americans are addicted to money and are willing to exploit the working class to further enrich themselves.
Here we go.
We have situations where companies cut back on the health care of their workers or the wages of their workers in order to give, unbelievably large compensation packages to their CEOs or do stock buybacks, which enrich their stockholders at the expense of the workers. So greed for some of these people has literally become a religion. I need more, like a drug addict.
Okay, that actually wasn't the clip, but that's a pretty good one.
Well, you know what? Again,
like Bernie.
Bernie Sanders, I admire him for being idealistic, and it is rare to find that unblemished idealism of from someone of his generation. That said, I mean, let's not pretend like what's going on as far as classism and socioeconomics in this country is something new. They had serfs in England, in the 14th and 15th centuries. And what were serfs? They were the permanent underclass. They couldn't move up. They were going to be the multi-generational poor unless some king, said their bloodline was all of a sudden blessed and now they're a duke or something. But other than that, you had hundreds of millions of people who were serfs for hundreds of years. There's always, so that's always been the dynamic about human nature, that the people who however they rise to the top, they want to maintain the system that keeps them at the top, and then they want to eviscerate the system that allows anyone to rise to the level that they are.
All right, so, okay, it's an age-old struggle, and Bernie's saying we have to confront it. So,
the problem with Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren is that they are trying to guarantee outcomes as opposed to guaranteeing equal access. There are some people out there that if you and I sat here, if we sat on this podcast right now and we said the first 10 people to show up to the Chicago Sun-Times radio station in the next 10 minutes, we'll give you each a $10 million check.
It's not happening, by the way. Go ahead.
No, but if we said that, 6 people wouldn't believe it, 2 people would forget, and the other 2 would show up late. So, so again, we're not talking about...
Actually, you have way more faith in the American people than I... If Dennis said right now, the next 10 people that show up at this office will get $10 million each, we'd have a line of people going down the block.
You'd have a line of people at probably 47 minutes from now.
No. My attitude about... Well, okay. The theme I've been hitting hard on about Bernie Sanders, the opposition to Bernie Sanders from the centrist wing of the Democratic Party, I don't believe the centrist wing has been honest about their opposition to Bernie Sanders. You just gave, the centrist wing of the Democratic Party does not want to come out and say they literally oppose the initiatives that Bernie is proposing because they realize that a good chunk of the Democratic Party supports them. All right. So what they do is they say you cannot get elected with these positions. And that, I feel, is a disingenuous argument that covers up a lot of polls that suggest you can get elected with this argument. And so what, in fact, Democrats are doing is they're protecting certain corporate interests under the guise of saying we would be stuck with Donald Trump if we advocated what Bernie wants.
You're giving them too much credit. They're not that smart. This is not about.
Rahm's not that smart to say 2 separate things at once.
No. They're not smart enough to orchestrate this elaborate plan.
It's not that elaborate. All you got to do is say, man's not electable.
But what Bernie Sanders is offering is no different than the New Deal. As a matter of fact, a lot of what he's offering are the things that they never got implemented under the New Deal.
Agreed.
So what he's offering is not that radical and historical sense.
And that just goes to show you how historically this country's moved to the right. Even the Democratic Party has moved to the right and abandoned many of its principles and ideals that drove people.
I think, but you're talking about dark money in politics, and you're talking about people being underinformed and misinformed, and like, I don't think this is about Democrats being beholden to their corporate donors. I think this is about Democrats not having faith enough, because Democrats are typically feckless. Republicans will go out and they will say the most obscene things, and if you look at them, cross-eyed, they'll look you back in your face like, yeah, I said it. Yeah. But Democrats will say something that they kind of sort of hope you might agree with them, and if you look at them funny, they'll say, well, wait, I'm open to negotiation.
Yeah, so, that's a valid point.
I think I got that audio.
All right, here we go.
You sent me, this link you sent me has like 4 different videos, so maybe this is it.
It's about talking about if he had a black son.
Great. Oh, wait, hold on. This one here. This one says the black student on how to handle getting pulled over by the police.
Yeah, that one.
That's what we're looking for?
Yeah.
All right, here we go.
My question is to, my name is Jamel Lawton. I'm from Banbury, South Carolina. I'm a sports management major. My question is to you. If I was your son, what advice would you give me the next time I pull over by a police officer?
Hold up, Mike, a little bit closer.
I'm sorry. If I'm your son, what advice would you give me the next time I be pulled over by a police officer?
Next time you pulled over by a police officer.
Here we go. It's coming.
Little Bernie.
I would do my best to identify who that police officer is in a polite way. Ask him or her for their name. I would respect what they are doing so that you don't get shot in the back of the head. But I would also be very mindful of the fact that as a nation, we have got to hold police officers accountable for the actions that they commit. And that is, so to answer your question, I would be very cautious, if you were my son, in terms of dealing with that police officer, but I also defend my rights and know my rights and make sure, if possible, that police officer's camera is on what goes on.
All right, that was from a couple weeks ago. Bernie answered your question. I call that Bernie's Habada moment. And that's from when the honeymooners way back when Jack.
Hamana.
First one can't hear. What? I just love that.
He always pulls the old man card when he needs a couple of seconds. I'm sorry, say that again. What did you say?
Hey, don't
Marty. He got looks like Chris. What's his name from Back to the Future? Doesn't he?
Don't mock the old man one. You'll be using it yourself in about 30 years. I can't hear you. God damn these kids, huh? Man. Don't they take advice from me? Don't ask the cop for his name, okay? That's number one.
No, you do ask the cop for his name.
Oh my goodness!
You do ask the cop for his name.
All right, what's your advice? What's your thoughts on that?
Bernie Sanders, one of the primary people working in his campaign, both last time and this time, is Nina Turner. Nina Turner was a state senator from Ohio. Mm-hmm. Nina Turner is very, very pro-black, and Nina Turner is one of his top advisors. It's pretty. I mean, it says something about him being unprepared to answer that question, or answer it as feebly as he did when he has someone like Nina Turner, who was in his ear, and she's one of his number one defenders, surrogates, whatever you want to call her. Number two, that said, I don't begrudge an 80-year-old Jewish man who spent the last 50 years in the Senate and 20 or 40 years in the Senate, and 20 years before that he was a mayor and then he was a state senator. I don't begrudge an 80-year-old Jewish guy in America who can't just off the cuff answer a question about something that we haven't solved as a country yet.
That way, I don't think he's 80 yet. He's not 80 yet.
He's 78.
Okay, well, he's not 80 yet.
Okay.
So wait till you get up there and people start adding years to you.
I'm just saying that it is unrealistic, and it is it's dishonest to hold Bernie standard to some intangible, ineffable standard that he's supposed to off the cuff have this perfect answer about an issue that we're still grappling with as a nation.
Fair enough. Now, his first thing out of his mouth was ask the officer his name. You recommend a black kid doing that, a teenager doing that. Why do you say that?
Well, number one, this is the problem that I have with. Let me answer it in two ways. The biggest problem the biggest reason why we haven't grappled with this problem yet is because as a nation we give too much deference to police officers. Police officers are public servants. Police officers are there to protect and serve when they are needed. And we have allowed the police force to evolve into this preemptive kind of, I'm going to size you up and determine before, in the absence of any information or evidence to the contrary, I'm going to size you up and determine your threat level and then respond in kind. And then when police officers do this and they make a mistake, we say, hey, they've got a hard job. They've got a dangerous job. You know, the top 10 most dangerous jobs in America, none of them are police officers. An electrician is more dangerous than a police officer. If you're a infrared thermographist, that's more dangerous, and you're out there doing IR testing on high voltage power lines.
Shout out
that's
to all
more
of our
dangerous.
infrared thermographist listeners out there, by the way. Shout out to all of you.
I'm glad you said that. I'm glad you said that because people out there probably have never heard of that or don't know what it is.
I never heard of it till you said it.
But that said, that position is orders of magnitude more dangerous than a police officer. So the first thing is we've got to stop giving this blanket deference to police officers, and we have to take them down from this place where they are the judge, jury, and executioner. No, you are the gatekeeper to bringing someone into the justice system. Someone else is the judge, someone else is the jury, and then someone else is the executioner. And that's part of the reason that we have this conundrum that we have in dealing with police officers. That's number one. Number two, if African Americans, when they are people of color in general, or people in general, you have no reason to be afraid of authority if you haven't done anything wrong. And if you and oftentimes you're in this catch-22 as an African, and I'm saying this from my personal experience. If you're too assertive, then that's a problem. If you're too servile, they think you're hiding something. So you may as well just know what the law is. And when a police officer pulls me over, depending upon how much time I have and where I'm headed and whatever, why did you pull me over? Because I know I've got my license. I know my license plates are up to date. Here I've got my insurance. My seatbelt was on. I wasn't speeding. So why are we having this interaction? Oh, and by the way, I need to know your name. Now maybe that will be more or less effective depending upon when you are. If I'm driving in the middle of West Virginia at 2:00 in the morning and a good old boy pulls me over, I'll probably be more. I'll probably have a little bit more brevity in how I deal
more
with
circumspect. Yes, sir.
But that said, we cannot be servile. That being servile, it perpetuates.
You're talking about something in the abstract. You're talking about the way it should be, and
no, I'm talking about as an African American. Here's my thing as an African American male. If you're going to shoot me and kill me, if a police officer pulls me over and he has it made up in his mind that when he pulls me over, I'm going to kill a black man today, whether I ask him for his name or not, whether my insurance is up to date or not, whether I had the turn signal on when I made that left or not. So because the reality of the situation is that the police officers in these situations, because we've allowed it to metastasize to the point where it is, because they have 100% of the power, which is why there's a law in the state of Indiana that's a very interesting law that says you have the right to defend yourself even against a police officer if they enter your home. So if you're in your home and a police officer enters your home, and whether
that's a law in Indiana.
Law in Indiana. And now in most states, even in self-defense, if you shoot a police officer, that police officer still has immunity and you can't use the facts of your self-defense in your court case, but you can in Indiana, and you can defend yourself up to and including self-defense of, if it happens to result in the death of the officer if he enters your home. So again, we need to have a conversation as a society.
Yeah.
About the power we give police officers.
I hear you. Everything you're saying, I absolutely hear what you're saying. But there's two issues. The issue is What do you advise your son or daughter, and and how to confront and deal with police officers at late night stops, and what in the most practical, realistic way of getting out of a difficult situation, as opposed to an important first step in the long overdue struggle to get police to act the right way?
I would tell my son or I have a 19-year-old daughter. So I would tell my son or my daughter, and my daughter has been in situations with me where I've gotten pulled over, so she knows that this is how I behave. You comply with what the officer is asking you to do, but you still comport yourself as such that you have certain rights. I don't just fold up because again, to my point, if the police officer has made up his mind that he's going to murder me, he's going to do it whether I'm servile or arrogant,
but it's a not either or, you know what I mean? There's something in between a cop who pulls you over. This is my day where I'm going to shoot this guy, which I don't even know if that cop actually literally exists, but let's say it does, and just a normal situation where a cop pulls over somebody in a car, and then you have to confront that.
Well, let me add this caveat. In Russia, for example, and I know I have to kind of laugh that I bring up Russia because we were supposed to talk about Trump, but in Russia, for example,
Trump's favorite country.
In Russia, if you own a car, you have to have a dash cam in your car. All cars in Russia have dash cams, and the reason that all cars in Russia have dash cams is because there was so much corruption, there was so much insurance fraud. People would purposely get into an accident, or they'd see somebody behind them, they'd just jam on the brakes so they can get rear-ended. So they had so much insurance fraud that they mandated that everybody have dash cams. So every African American, especially if you live in a less than desirable area or your socioeconomic status is meager, you should have a dash cam, or you can go get a dash cam off of Amazon for pennies, for not a lot of money. But everyone should have a dash cam, and that feed should be going somewhere in the cloud where even if you have a dash cam and somebody grabs the camera, it's already backed up somewhere or whatever. And you know how every video I've ever seen on YouTube, every video, when a police officer pulls over a person and that driver says, regardless of his race, when that driver says, just so you know, this interaction is being recorded. As soon as the police officer knows that there's a record being made of everything that he says and does, all of a sudden he finds okay, Mr. Seaton, the reason I pulled you over, sir. And you can, there are videos out there where you'll see that the police officer is very aggressive, and sometime it goes 30, 45, 60 seconds until the driver finally gets a moment to say, just so you know, this interaction is being recorded, and you'll see a 180 in that police officer's demeanor. So we have to, as African Americans, or we have to as citizens, we have to hold our government. We get the government that we deserve and that we demand. And as long as we are going to accept police misconduct, then we're going to continue to be mistreated by police.
You know what? I cannot argue with anything you just said. David Seaton has convinced me. That said, hey, kid, just say yes, sir.
But if you could argue with David Seaton on what he just said, they'd encourage you to call in on their Friday night show on WVON. 9 p.m. until midnight on WVON. What's the letters or numbers?
1690 a.m., the talk of Chicago.
1690 a.m. Friday nights. David Seaton along with
Atiba
Buchanan. Almost called him David Buchanan.
What's the name of the show again?
The Buchanan and Seaton Show. I almost said the Seaton and Buchanan Show.
Yeah. Atiba right now is listening. I'm outraged. Uh-oh, here he comes. Open up that door. Atiba Buchanan's upset. Anyway, David Seaton's always a blast talking politics with you, and I'm going to have you back on a regular basis. But now you're such a big shot with your own radio show, it may be harder to get you in the studio.
Well, you know what? When I tell people I have a radio show and we talk about politics, a lot of times they roll their eyes. But the conversation that you and I just had for the last hour, we did not mention one politician. We didn't, but Trump. We were talking.
Yeah. But
we were talking about politics.
You know what? And the funny thing is, I'll say it again. Now, one thing that I talked to David about what we were going to talk about. It started with religion. And if I hadn't seen Godfather 2, I don't know what I would have talked about today. That movie had such an impact on me, David. Seeing it again, and I'll just close by saying this. I just watching it in its entirety. So many times I see Godfather 2 at my friend's house. Oh, yeah, let's watch a half-hour snatch of it, but to watch it unfold in all its majesty, just
unquestioned fealty is dangerous. I'll say this last thing too, because you talk, generally speaking, when I hear white people talk about Godfather, and they kind of talk about it in this very reverential, it's such this great piece of blah blah. But it's a gangster movie about a bunch of guys running, doing illegal things and killing people.
It's great, a fantastic film.
But can you name one? Can you name one gangster movie that has people of color in it that has the same reverence in the pantheon of
pantheon of me? American Gangster is perhaps, it's arguably the third greatest movie of this century. And when I was watching Godfather 2 last night, I kept going back to American Gangster in my mind, because the problem, in my humble opinion, with America's reaction to Godfather 2 is they take all the wrong lessons of the movie. So it's a brilliant movie, and you're right. I talked about in terms of abuse of powers and lying, but you talked about unbridled fealty, fear, just being dominated by somebody else. And the lessons that America seems to draw on that is, I want that power. I want people to be afraid of me. And it's similar to American Gangster. I don't know if you ever saw that. I've only seen that one 452 times. But that great confrontation between Denzel Washington's character and at the end, what's the old boy's name again?
Oh, old boy.
The guy who plays the cop. I've just blanked.
Kurt Russell?
Oh, yeah. Russell Crowe.
Russell Crowe.
Kurt Russell. Kurt Russell Crowe.
That is such a great exchange.
Yes.
About what is morally right, what is just right by power.
Exactly.
And where Denzel Washington looks at him and goes, so let me get this straight. You're the guy that passed up the $900,000 in the.
Right.
Yep, that was me.
Exactly.
And so all the wrong lessons are taken from both movies, and so that's my biggest problem with the gangster movie, the great gangster movies, is that people take the wrong lessons from them.
One day there's going to be a movie called American Godfather, and it's going to be about the 4 years of Donald Trump.
Whoa, and you know what? That is as good a spot as ever to leave this show.
Oh, absolutely. And before we go, we've gone pretty long here, so if you're listening, you must be into the show. So I think now would be a good time to, you have that little black book. You grab that black book. You tell us who's coming up on the show in the next few days here. And as you get that ready, we'll go to the live stream chat, go in and see what you guys have to say. All right. Shout out to Stephen and Jay Marie. They've weighed in here on your conversation today. They said, boo Joe Biden.
David Seaton. He loves Biden.
And I love our live stream chat room. You guys are awesome. All right. So if you could, Ben, who do we got on?
Well, tomorrow, I'm really looking forward to this. Tom Schubert from the Chicago Sun-Times will be here.
Oh, he was in the elevator when
is that right?
Grabbed David.
The man knows more about reefer in the state of Illinois. By the way, just a suggestion, not telling you who you have in your show, but if you want to know have a guy on who knows about reefer law in the state of Illinois, Tommy Schuba, and we're going to go.
If you know a guy you can buy reefer from, let me know. I'm always looking for new.
And then, oh my God, the Heartland Mamas will be here tomorrow. I love the Heartland Mamas. Heidi and Murray will be here tomorrow, and looking forward to all the political talk with them. They love talking about.
And then we got
Ramana Hussein, Ramana Rundown on Friday.
Obviously, the Ramana Rundown, and we got a bonus interview coming in here.
David Roeder. We better hurry up and end this show. We get Roeder in
probably
here.
Outside the door waiting. No, come on.
No, he's not coming here for another half an hour. But anyway, so lots of good stuff ahead on the Ben Joravsky Show. David Seaton, thank you so much for coming in. Miles Kampf-Lassin earlier in the day. And, of course, as David Seaton knows, the man, the myth, the legend behind the board, back home in Alton. They call him White Lightning. Give yourself a raise. Take it out of petty cash. See you tomorrow, everybody.
Hey, and remember, you can download previous Ben Joravsky shows and Benny J bonus interviews at both Chicago Sun-Times and Chicago Reader websites, and wherever else you download your favorite podcasts. Downloaders, we live stream this show. It's true. Tuesdays through Fridays, 1 until 3 p.m. Central Time. Once again, at both Chicago Sun-Times and Chicago Reader websites, and the Chicago Sun-Times YouTube channel. Yeah, we haven't been on Facebook in a while. I don't know. I think we may stick to just posting things on Facebook. We'll go on Facebook video. Let us know on the live stream chat if you want us to go back on Facebook. We're done. We'll see you tomorrow.